Even so, that place isn't all that far away. He should have been back by now. Could he have encountered some trouble along the way? Lord Lan murmured as he stroked the devilish patterns on his own face in a contemplative manner. What troubles could he possibly encounter? With his powers, no human cultivator below the body integration stage would dare to mess with him. The other devilish being replied with a shake of his head. Not necessarily. The humans have some secret treasures that can allow one to punch above their weight. Alternatively, a few late spatial tempering cultivators who are adept in combination techniques can also be very troublesome, Lord Lan said. All of the human settlements in this area have been surrounded. How could there possibly be such an inconvenient coincidence? The bald devilish being chuckled in a nonchalant manner. Right as his voice trailed off, a low ringing sound suddenly rang out from his body, and both devilish beings were rather taken aback by this. The bald devilish being immediately waved a hand through the air, and a white formation plate appeared in his hand amid a flash of black light. He pointed a finger toward the formation plate, and a burst of transparent fluctuations immediately rippled through the air, following which white light flashed from the surface of the plate, and the furious face of an elderly man appeared. It was none other than the fellow Taoist Li they had been referring to. "Brother Li, why are you contacting us through this formation plate, and why are you still not back yet?" The bald devilish being asked in a slightly displeased manner. Lord Lan's expression eased slightly upon seeing that the elderly man was alive and well, but a hint of displeasure then appeared in his eyes as well. "We didn't bring along many illusion devil stones for this formation plate to use up, so you'd better have a good reason for contacting us. HMPH, my grandson was killed by human cultivators not long ago, and I'm pursuing the perpetrator now. However, it's very likely that there's a body integration cultivator among their ranks, so I may not be able to exact revenge on my own. I'll need you two to help me. In return, I'm willing to give you half of everything I obtained during this sacred sacrifice," the elderly man said with killing intent flashing through his eyes. "How do you know that a body integration stage human cultivator was involved, Brother Li?" the bald devilish being asked in a surprised manner. "I've already been to the place where my grandson and his subordinates were killed, but there was no lingering aura suggesting that a battle had taken place. There's no way a spatial tempering cultivator could have accomplished this, so there's a very good chance that the perpetrator is a body integration cultivator," the elderly man explained. "I see, that does seem quite plausible. Do you know the exact number of this group of human cultivators, Brother Li?" Lord Lan asked in a solemn voice. "I do. I could sense the residual aura of only 2 humans there," the elderly man replied. "Oh, in that case, the 3 of us should definitely be able to take care of them, but the problem is that we have an important duty on our shoulders. If something goes wrong as we're hunting these people down, then the sacred ancestor won't be happy," the bald devilish being said in a hesitant manner. "Those body integration human cultivators are definitely here to oppose our sacred race. If we can kill them and foil their plans, then the sacred ancestor will only reward us for our efforts. Besides, there may only be a single body integration cultivator involved, and the 3 of us can even take on someone at the pinnacle of the body integration stage, so there's virtually no risk involved. How about this? Aside from half of everything I obtained during this sacred sacrifice, I'll also give you that rotten tendril zoysia of mine," the elderly man said through gritted teeth. The bald devilish being was very tempted upon hearing this. "Oh, you really must be eager to take revenge if you're even offering such a precious treasure. In that case, I'm certainly willing to lend you a hand. What do you say, Brother Lan?" Lord Lan was also rather tempted by this proposition, but he asked again in a cautious manner, "Fellow Taoist Li, are you sure that there are only 2 perpetrators?" A hint of fury resurfaced in the elderly man's eyes, but he forcibly repressed it and harumphed coldly, "HMPH, are you doubting my abilities, fellow Taoist Lan? If there are more than 2 of them, then I won't force you 2 to fight alongside me." "All right, that's all I needed to hear. We'll go to join you right away. Make sure you don't let those 2 human cultivators shake you off, Brother Li," Lord Lan said with a faint smile. "Those 2 killed my only direct lineal descendant. Unless they suddenly end up on the other side of the realm, there's no way they'll be able to escape my tracking secret technique," the elderly man said in a confident manner. Immediately thereafter, white light flashed from the formation plate, and the image of Lord Li abruptly vanished. He had cut off the communication from his end. I was wondering what was taking him so long. I guess this understandable. If my only direct lineal descendant were killed by someone, I would also be sure to capture them and torture them for a few years before killing them. The bald devilish being chuckled coldly. At our cultivation bases, it's virtually impossible to have any more offspring, so we naturally have to pay more attention to our existing descendants. Thankfully, most of us have quite a few descendants, and fellow Taoist Li's situation is rather uncommon. It's no wonder that he's so furious and willing to offer such a large reward for our help, Lord Lan also said with a smile. If it's just 2 human cultivators, then there shouldn't be any issues. Let's set off right away. Perhaps we'll be able to strip some powerful treasures from those 2 humans as well, the bald devilish being said as a hint of greed flashed through his eyes. Of course, we already agreed to assist Brother Li, so we should naturally do everything in our power. Let's go. Blue arcs of lightning crackled around Lord Lan as he spoke, and his arms suddenly transformed into a pair of fleshy blue wings. Not only were the wings riddled with blue bone spikes, there were countless arcs of lightning revolving around them, creating a very menacing sight to behold. He flapped his wings, and a string of thunderclaps rang out in rapid succession as he vanished into thin air as a blue arc of lightning. When he reappeared, he was already several thousand feet away. The bald devilish being swept a sleeve through the air upon seeing this, releasing a red ball of light that transformed into a crimson cloud, which quickly enveloped his entire body. The crimson cloud then shot forth in pursuit of the arc of lightning amid a flash of red light. The 2 of them vanished into the distance in the blink of an eye, and meanwhile, on the other end, Lord Li had no intention of stopping to wait for them. Instead, he unleashed a secret technique that increased his speed even further. Letter 1D627, letter 1D4C7, letter 212F, letter 212F, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D623, letter 1D450, letter 1D630, letter 1D45A. Through his bloodline secret technique, he would be able to temporarily track the perpetrators, but there was a time limit. On top of that, if the people he was pursuing detected that something was off or used a teleportation formation to teleport straight out of his sensory range, then he would lose his targets. As such, before he caught up to them, he wasn't going to allow any complacency to set in. In any case, he had reinforcements on the way, so even if he found himself unable to kill his targets, he would just have to stall them until his companions arrived. With that in mind, he continued to fly through the air with burning fury in his heart. At this point, Han Li was still traveling toward Heavenly City with fairy silver light, completely oblivious to the fact that he was being pursued. Due to the fact that he wasn't in a battle or fleeing for his life, his speed of flight was naturally far slower than that of the 3 devilish lords pursuing him. As time passed, the distance between the 2 was naturally gradually whittled down. A day and a night later, just as Han Li and Fairy Silver Light were discussing matters regarding the 4 major sects in Heavenly City, Han Li's expression suddenly changed as he swept a sleeve through the air. A short silver ruler immediately emerged before transforming into a giant ruler projection that was over 100 feet in length, then slashing through the air behind him. An enormous black staff instantly appeared out of thin air, and the 2 treasures clashed amid an earth-shattering boom. A ball of piercing light emerged, and a burst of astonishing fluctuations erupted forth, threatening to cause the entire surrounding space to collapse. Fairy Silver Light emerged from her white cloud in a startled manner, before turning toward the place where the fluctuations had erupted from with a hint of bewilderment in her eyes. And Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he calmly waved a hand through the air, and the short silver ruler pierced through space before reappearing in his grasp. At this moment, all of the fluctuations finally faded, and the horned elderly man appeared in the distance. However, he had swelled to around 50 to 60 feet tall, and he was holding a giant black staff as he appraised Han Li with a vicious look in his eyes. That's a devilish lord. The alarm in Fairy Silver Light's eyes grew even more pronounced after she swept her spiritual sense toward the elderly man. She then immediately made a hand seal, and a pair of silver hooks emerged from her body. One of the hooks was engraved with the image of a white crescent moon, while the other was engraved with a crimson sun. As soon as the weapons appeared, countless stars emerged in the nearby area in a flash, clearly indicating that this was a pair of extraordinary treasures. Han Li appraised the elderly man and abruptly slammed a palm into his own chest without uttering a single word. A dull thump rang out as golden light erupted from his body, and he opened his mouth to expel a ball of azure chi that was interspersed with black threads. I see, you must be related to one of the devilish beings I killed earlier, right? Only a bloodline secret technique like this one would have planted a tracking mark on me without my detection. However, your mental state was a little too unstable, and that allowed me to notice your bloodline mark. Otherwise, I may not have been able to detect your presence," Han Li said with a smile as he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a silver fireball that incinerated the ball of azure chi into nothingness. "At your cultivation base, you must be quite an important figure in the Elder Devil race, right? Tell us your name," Fairy Silver Light said as a hint of killing intent flashed through her eyes. "HMPH, I am Lord Li, a subordinate to sacred ancestor Zhu Guang. You killed my grandson, so I'm going to tear you into shreds and torture your soul until it disintegrates." Instead of displaying any fear toward the two body integration cultivators he had encountered, Lord Li was glowering at Han Li with fury burning in his eyes instead. "Is that so? Let's see if you have what it takes," Han Li chuckled in a nonchalant manner. At his current cultivation base, a mere early body integration stage, devilish being really wasn't all that threatening to him. "You think you can take on both of us on your own? There's no need to waste time with words here, Brother Han. This devilish lord is ripe for the killing," Fairy Silver Light said in a frosty voice, following which the two silver hooks before her transformed into countless silver hook projections that surged forth in a massive wave. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's words upon seeing this. Fairy Silver Light had said exactly what he was thinking, and he raised a hand to wave the silver ruler through the air again. Piercing silver light flashed, and a ruler projection that was several 100 feet in length shot forth again, reaching the elderly man in the blink of an eye before crashing down with devastating force. Lord Li let loose a low roar upon seeing this, and abruptly swept his black staff through the air, conjuring up countless black staff projections that formed an impenetrable barrier around himself. The silver ruler projection was repelled by this barrier, then crumbled away under the effect of some kind of peculiar power, completely unable to breach the elderly man's defenses. At this moment, the countless hook projections also arrived, but all of them quickly vanished amid flashes of silver light upon coming into contact with the barrier of staff projections. In the end, the two silver hooks were forced to revert back to their original form, and Fairy Silver Light's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this. She immediately switched to a different hand seal, and the two silver hooks suddenly rose up into the air as two streaks of silver light before vanishing on the spot. In the next instant, violent fluctuations ran through the entire sky, and all of the world's origin chi within a radius of several tens of kilometers was swept up. Countless red and white runes instantly surged out of thin air, then converged to form two gargantuan balls of light, one white and one red, each of which was around an acre in size. The ball of white light was completely silent, while the ball of red light was rumbling incessantly, and they both came crashing down from above. Lord Li was quite alarmed by the sight of these two devastating balls of light, and he swept his staff through the air again, upon which it abruptly transformed into a gust of fierce black wind that swept toward the two balls of light in a frenzy, looking as if he were planning to forcibly tear through them. However, right at this moment, Han Li suddenly rubbed his hands together, and the silver ruler in his grasp abruptly vanished without any premonition. In the next instant, faint silver light flashed behind Lord Li, and the silver ruler emerged silently before hurtling through the air like a bolt of silver lightning. Lord Li was completely caught off guard. His body was instantly enveloped by several layers of silver light. He let loose a roar of fury as black light erupted from his body in an attempt to break through the layers of silver light, but he was clearly unable to accomplish this in a short time. At this moment, the fierce gust of black wind formed by the staff clashed with the balls of light up above, and an earth-shattering boom rang out, causing the entire sky to tremor incessantly. The black wind then suddenly transformed into a pair of identical gargantuan pillars that plunged viciously into the two balls of light. The balls of light dissipated, but a pristine crescent moon and a scorching crimson sun emerged from within them. The two were radiating dazzling light, and they had temporarily trapped the two giant pillars that had been thrust into them. Lord Li was tugging violently on the pillars with his powerful arms, but they refused to budge. It was as if they had taken root in the moon and the sun. A cold smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he pointed a finger at Lord Li. The layers of silver light around him immediately began to emit a loud buzzing sound, and a series of silver runes of different sizes emerged, producing a burst of enormous force that compressed violently toward Lord Li, instantly crushing most of the protective black light around his body in the process. The elderly man was clearly quite reluctant to abandon the treasures in his hands, but he was forced to release the two giant pillars. A vicious light then flashed through his eyes as he quickly made a hand seal before letting loose a loud cry. An astonishing scene then ensued. His massive body suddenly began to swell drastically once again, and two balls of flesh bulged from his shoulders. Following a string of harrowing cracks and pops, two more identical heads emerged on his shoulders. At the same time, four more balls of flesh bulged out of his back, and they transformed into two pairs of arms amid a flash of black light. The elderly man had transformed into a devilish being with 3 heads and 6 arms in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, there was violent black devilish chi erupting from his body, and his aura had swelled to become more than twice as powerful as it had originally been. As such, his early body integration stage powers rose to around the mid-body integration stage. After making this transformation, a vicious look appeared on all 3 of Lord Li's faces. He flipped his 6 hands over, and 6 black devilish swords emerged, then unleashed countless black threads that erupted forth like a giant net. The layers of silver light around him were instantly sliced into countless pieces, and Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, as he immediately waved a hand through the air. The shattered fragments of the silver light began to converge and regenerate, but during this split-second delay, Lord Li's body flashed, and he vanished on the spot. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted several hundred feet away, and Lord Li re-emerged. As soon as he appeared, he let loose a thunderous roar, and a series of black devilish patterns appeared over his body. Immediately thereafter, he expanded even further to over 1,000 feet in size, then swept his 6 arms through the air. The 6 giant swords that he was wielding vanished amid a flash of black light, but his gigantic hands reached out like 3 pairs of small mountains, with 2 of them reaching for the moon and the sun, while 2 more reached out for Han Li and fairy silver light. Meanwhile, his remaining 2 hands were rapidly making a series of hand seals. At the same time, the 2 heads on his shoulders closed their eyes, then began to chant something as black runes swirled around them. The sun and the moon formed by the silver hooks were quite profound, but in the face of Lord Li, who had become drastically more powerful, they were no longer able to continue locking the pair of giant black staves in place. Thus, the 2 staves shot forth through the air before landing in Lord Li's grasp, following which the 2 combined as one and reverted back to a single giant black staff. Almost in the exact same instant, Han Li felt the sky dim before his eyes, and a giant black palm reached him in a flash. Han Li remained completely calm and collected as golden light revolved around his body. He extended a palm out of his sleeve, which transformed into a giant golden hand that reached out through the air. Prior to even coming into contact with one another, countless golden arcs of lightning erupted from the golden hand, and it crashed violently into the massive black palm. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D493, letter 1D4E, letter 1D486, letter 1D500, letter 1D486, letter 1D484, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D4F6. A resounding thunderclap rang out, and the devilish hand was instantly vanquished, as if those arcs of golden lightning were the bane of its existence. In contrast, fairy silver light didn't dare to take the attack head-on. In the instant that the devilish hand was about to reach her, she transformed into a gentle breeze that vanished on the spot, leaving the devilish hand to strike nothing but empty air. Lord Li's expression darkened even further after witnessing his attacks being nullified, and his other 2 heads suddenly ceased their chanting. The 2 hands that were making hand seals just a moment ago abruptly reached out to point at Han Li and fairy silver light. 2 sharp ringing sounds rang out from his fingertips, and a pair of crimson threads shot forth before vanishing into thin air in a flash. A solemn look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he suddenly raised a hand, upon which a small black mountain appeared before him. The mountain was around 70 to 80 feet tall, and it hovered before him like a massive shield. This was none other than the extreme essence-effused mountain. In the next instant, the crimson thread reappeared several tens of feet away before plunging viciously into the small black mountain. Crimson light flashed, and the thread managed to pierce several feet into the mountain before it finally dissipated. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this. No one was more aware than him of just how incredible the extreme essence-effused mountain's defensive prowess was. The treasure had been infused with countless precious materials and refined on several occasions. Even the average divine spirit treasure wouldn't be able to leave so much as a scratch on its surface. As such, the fact that the crimson thread was able to plunge so far into it was a testament to just how fearsome it was. It was no wonder that even after his transformation, It had taken Lord Li so long to prepare that attack. The attack didn't pose much of a threat to him, but Fairy Silver Light would most likely struggle to handle it. Just as Han Li was thinking this, he heard a muffled groan, and he hurriedly cast his gaze toward Fairy Silver Light to find that she was stumbling back a few steps with a hand clasped over her own shoulder. There was a red shield, a flag, and a jade badge hovering in front of her, but the spiritual light radiating from them had dimmed significantly, and it seemed that they had all been severely damaged. A pained look appeared on Fairy Silverlight's face, and she immediately opened her mouth to expel a small silver sword. The flying sword flew over to her shoulder as a streak of silver light, then abruptly sliced off her arm. Strangely enough, not a single drop of blood flowed out of the self-inflicted wound. As soon as the arm was detached from her body, it burst into crimson flames and was quickly incinerated into ashes. Be careful, Brother Han. This is one of the 4 great devilish flames of the Elder Devil race, the blood-eroding devilish flame. Once it enters a target's body, there's no way it can be expelled aside from through the use of several types of legendary treasures, Fairy Silver Light cautioned in an urgent voice. She then flipped her remaining hand over to produce a fragrant white pill amid a flash of azure light, then swallowed the pill without any hesitation. A burst of azure light immediately revolved around the cross-section of the wound on her shoulder, and another arm that was identical to the severed one appeared. However, her complexion had paled significantly behind her mask, and it was quite clear that she had paid quite a heavy price to instantaneously regenerate that lost limb. Han Li glanced at Fairy Silver Light's new arm, then turned back to the mountainous Lord Li, and a hint of killing intent flashed through his eyes. Blood-eroding devilish flames. I see, it looks like I underestimated you. But then again, this is a good thing. It shows that you're definitely quite an important figure in the Elder Devil race, which gives me even more incentive to kill you. You think the 2 of you can kill me? Lord Li guffawed in a disdainful manner. He then abruptly swept his giant black staff through the air, and countless mountainous staff projections took shape amid a string of rumbling booms, then swept toward Han Li and Fairy Silver Light with devastating force. Before the staff projections had even reached them, both of them were struck by a burst of suffocating spiritual pressure, as if heaven and earth were about to crumble around them. HMPH, it seems that you're very confident in your own strength. As opposed to being alarmed by the situation, a cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and his body abruptly swelled drastically in size amid a flash of golden light. Within the span of just a single breath, he had transformed into an enormous golden ape. He made a grabbing motion with both hands, and a black mountain and an azure mountain appeared in his grasp. He then raised both mountains high up into the air, upon which they expanded to several thousand feet tall, and kept all of the oncoming staff projections at bay. Letter 1D487, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4E, letter 1D66C, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D4AT. The staff projections unleashed by Lord Li were also extremely powerful, and they struck the 2 mountains amid a rapid string of resounding booms. But after the projections faded, the mountains were revealed again, having sustained no damage aside from some small pits and bumps. Incredulous looks appeared on all 3 of Lord Li's faces upon seeing this, and he exclaimed, "Impossible! How could there possibly be a body integration stage human cultivator with strength superior to mine?" He turned to inspect the giant ape that Han Li transformed into, and the astonishment in his eyes grew even more pronounced. It would be rude of me not to return the favor. How about you take an attack from me as well?" The golden ape chuckled coldly before abruptly bringing the 2 massive mountains together, then hurled them with devastating force. 2 resounding booms rang out as the pair of mountains hurtled through the air, leaving 2 white trails in their wake. Even when they were still a few hundred feet away from Lord Li, a burst of enormous invisible force had weighed down upon him, causing the space around him to tremor violently as if it were on the brink of being shattered. Lord Li was extremely alarmed to see this, but he refused to believe that he would lose to Han Li in a contest of strength. As such, all 3 of his heads let loose ferocious roars, and he swept his giant black staff toward the 2 mountains, sending countless staff projections hurtling through the air once again. An earth-shattering boom erupted, and Lord Li's hands instantly went numb as his giant staff was wrenched out of his grasp. At the same time, a burst of tremendous force crashed into his body, sending him flying back as he threw up a mouthful of black blood. The 2 giant mountains only faltered momentarily in midair before crashing down with devastating force again, threatening to crush Lord Li into mincemeat. An expression of shock and fury appeared on Lord Li's face, and his 6 arms suddenly detached from his body on their own, then transformed into a cloud of blood mist around him. Immediately thereafter, the 2 giant mountains also slammed into the blood mist, but Lord Li was already nowhere to be seen, clearly having escaped using some kind of movement technique. Hanli faltered slightly upon seeing this before a furious look appeared in his eyes. He thumped his own chest violently as an inky black vertical eye appeared on his glabella, and as soon as it emerged, a pillar of black light that was as thick as a large bowl erupted from it. The pillar of black light then instantly vanished into thin air, and in the next instant, a rumbling boom erupted several thousand feet away. An alarmed roar rang out, and spatial fluctuations erupted as the mountainous Lord Li stumbled out of thin air. Han Li immediately pointed to his 2 mountains in the distance without any hesitation upon seeing this, and the pair of mountains shuddered in response. Silver runes flashed on the surface of one of the mountains as it released a burst of gray light, while the other released scintillating azure light that transformed into countless streaks of invisible sword chi. The 2 intertwined with one another, and even heaven and earth tremored in the face of Han Li's wrath. Lord Li's faces immediately paled upon seeing this, and he stomped both of his feet onto the space below him without any hesitation. His feet then exploded into 2 bursts of blood mist as well, revealing a pair of silver foot bones. Not only were these foot bones flashing with silver light, there was also a pair of crimson talismans adhered to their surfaces. Lord Li's 3 heads then began to chant a strange incantation in unison, and the 2 crimson talismans spontaneously combusted. A dozen or so large crimson runes were imprinted onto the foot bones in a flash, following which the foot bones transformed into a pair of silver flying wheels amid a flash of spiritual light. Crimson devilish flames erupted over the surface of the flying wheels, and they began to rotate at a rapid speed, transforming the devilish lord into a streak of crimson light that hurtled away into the distance. The wheels were traveling so quickly that they covered a distance of over 10,000 feet in the blink of an eye. Lord Li had decided to flee the scene as soon as he realized that he was no match for Han Li. Han Li naturally faltered slightly upon seeing this, and his brows furrowed tightly. This Lord Li seemed to be determined to battle Han Li to the death, and even unleashed his elder devil avatar. Yet now, he was fleeing the scene at the first sign of trouble, and that was truly very unexpected. Only the span of a few breaths had passed since Han Li had transformed into his giant mountain ape form, and Fairy Silver Light took advantage of this opportunity to catch her breath and recover somewhat from her expenditure. She was elated to see that Han Li was overwhelming their opponent, but at the same time she hurriedly yelled, "Brother Han, we can't allow him to escape. If he finds other devilish beings and comes back, then we'll be in big trouble." As soon as her voice trailed off, she pointed a finger at her pair of silver hooks and stowed them away up her sleeve. She then raised a hand to summon a green flying shuttle, which she immediately flew into without any hesitation. A resounding boom rang out, and the shuttle shot forth through the air as a streak of green light that was traveling no slower than the streak of crimson light in the distance. "That's a spirit treasure on the chaotic myriad spirit roll, the celestial green shuttle. I didn't think that she'd be in possession of such a treasure," Han Li murmured to himself in a rather surprised manner before a cold smile appeared on his face. "Of course, there's no way I'd let that old devil get away." Immediately thereafter, he made a hand seal, and his giant ape body was suddenly enshrouded in a layer of silver light. A clear cry then rang out, and a giant silver bird that was over 1,000 feet in length appeared in the place of the giant golden ape. The giant bird raised its head and flapped its wings, and arcs of silver lightning erupted from its body, as another pair of translucent wings also appeared on its back. These were none other than Han Li's thunderstorm wings. As such, the giant bird now had 2 pairs of massive wings. This integration of the Tian Peng transformation and the thunderstorm wings was an extreme movement technique that Han Li had developed over the past few centuries. The giant silver bird flapped all 4 of its wings in unison and instantly vanished on the spot as a bolt of lightning, leaving a trail of thunderclaps in its wake that were becoming more and more distant. At this point, the streak of crimson light was already several tens of kilometers away. Within the crimson light, Lord Li was relentlessly pouring his energy into the silver wheels beneath him while frantically looking around with an urgent expression. Prior to catching up to Han Li's duo, he had communicated with his 2 companions again. At the time, Those two devilish lords were already quite close to him, and that was why he had dared to engage two body integration stage beings in battle on his own. However, never did he think that the male human cultivator who had killed his grandson would be this powerful. However, that wasn't too much of an issue. He hadn't unleashed his most powerful trump card, either, and he would be able to launch a counterattack once his companions joined him. As such, he would still have an opportunity to kill those two human cultivators. With that in mind, Lord Li forcibly repressed the fury in his heart and began to chant something as he flew. Plumes of blood mist erupted from the wounds on his shoulders, and the flesh there squirmed and writhed incessantly. Moments later, all 6 of his dismembered arms had fully regenerated. Right at this moment, a male voice suddenly sounded beside his ears. "Why are you in such a sorry state, Brother Li? Are those two human cultivators that difficult to deal with? Rest assured, we've already set up a temporary devilish formation nearby. All you have to do is lure the two of them into the formation, and we'll definitely be able to kill them together." The voice belonged to none other than that bald devilish being. Lord Li was naturally ecstatic to hear this, and he immediately gave an affirmative response before suddenly changing direction. At this point, the streak of green light was still close to 10 kilometers away, and a vicious look appeared on Lord Li's face as he flew directly toward a cluster of small mountains. This was where the other two devilish lords were hiding, and they had also set up an extremely discreet formation there. In Lord Li's mind, all they had to do was use the formation to kill the female human cultivator within the streak of green light, which would leave Han Li on his own, and the 3 of them would definitely be able to take him down together. Fairy Silverlight was naturally completely oblivious to this insidious plot, and she continued to give chase as quickly as she could. Within the span of just a few breaths, the 2 of them were about to enter the cluster of small mountains. Just as Lord Li was about to fly into one of the mountains, however, a rumbling thunderclap suddenly erupted right above him, following which a giant 4-winged bird emerged amid a flash of silver lightning. The bird then flapped its 4 wings and vanished again as an arc of lightning. In the next instant, Lord Li heard a thunderclap erupt right above his head, following which a set of enormous talons came sweeping down from above at such a rapid speed that there was no time for him to take evasive measures. In his shock and fury, he could only pour forth more energy into the protective spiritual light around his body, causing it to swell drastically and form a virtually substantial light barrier. However, the light barrier posed no impediment to the talons and was torn apart with ease. Lord Li let loose a blood-curdling cry as his body plummeted down from above. At the same time, 2 geysers of blood erupted from his shoulders, which had clearly just been pierced through by the giant bird's talons. However, even after being caught off guard and sustaining these wounds, Lord Li was still able to retaliate. The pair of devilish flying wheels beneath him transformed into a pair of head-sized crimson fireballs that shot forth directly toward the giant bird up above, and even before they had come into contact with the bird's body, the entire space had already been set alight. At the same time, Lord Li twisted around and transformed into a streak of crimson light again, before continuing to fly toward the small mountain, which was only around half a kilometer away. As long as he could enter the devilish formation that had been set up and unite with his companions, he would no longer have to fear the giant bird he was being pursued by. However, the giant 4-winged bird up above merely harumphed coldly upon seeing this, and a layer of 5-colored light suddenly erupted from its body as it transformed into an extremely exuberant 5-colored peacock. The peacock spread its wings to release balls of 5-colored light, which formed 5 giant halos that hurtled directly toward the oncoming fireballs. As for the 5-colored peacock itself, it flapped its wings and disappeared again as a ball of 5-colored light. The 2 crimson fireballs struck these halos amid a string of explosive booms, melting through the first 3 halos, only to be stopped in their tracks by the 4th one. The final 2 halos then swept forth to trap the 2 fireballs, then formed a pair of massive balls of light. Immediately thereafter, the 2 balls of light exploded, and a vast expanse of 5-colored light surged forth in all directions. Lord Li was swept up by this 5-colored light, and his body suddenly felt extremely sluggish. He felt as if he were flying through extremely thick treacle, and his speed was reduced significantly. Help me? As a devilish lord, Lord Li naturally had far more battle experience than the average cultivator, and he instantly knew that he was in an extremely perilous situation. His desperate cry for help rang out like a resounding thunderclap, and at the same time, he made a hand seal, and a suit of blackish-red armor appeared over his body amid a flash of black light. The entire suit of armor was covered in intricate silver runes, so it was clearly no ordinary treasure. Lord Li had only just had a chance to adopt this defensive measure before two giant shimmering golden fists suddenly entered the five-colored light around him, then hurtled directly toward his chest. Under the restriction of the five-colored light, there was no way for him to evade this attack, so he could only inject his power into the suit of armor with all his might. Scintillating light immediately erupted from the suit of armor, and it was as if a blackish-red sun had emerged. However, with Han Li's current level of unfathomable powers, his two fists were definitely no less powerful than a pair of ordinary spirit treasures. The wince-inducing sound of metal grating on metal rang out, and the first golden fist struck the suit of armor with ferocious might. Shockwaves proliferated outward in all directions in the wake of the collision, but the suit of devilish armor managed to remain intact as the silver runes on its surface flashed violently. However, the other golden fist then also struck the suit of devilish armor, and after receiving such a devastating blow twice in succession, it immediately shattered amid an anguished wail, revealing a layer of glossy black scales. The golden fist then crashed into Lord Li's devilish body without any hesitation, and a dull thump rang out as if the fist had struck a dead tree. Golden and black light intertwined, and Lord Li's body only swayed slightly before the fist was stopped cold in its tracks by that seemingly unremarkable layer of black scales. A sinister smile appeared on Lord Li's face upon seeing this, and he made a grabbing motion with all six of his hands. Devilish chi swirled around his fingers, and the vibrant five-colored light around him twisted and warped violently, looking as if it were going to crumble at any moment. Right at this moment, a long cry rang out from the small mountain, and two devilish figures shot forth toward Lord Li as two rapid streaks of light. These were none other than the two other body integration state devilish lords. All of a sudden, a string of crackling sounds rang out from the golden fist that was adhered to Lord Li's body, following which countless golden lightning snakes erupted forth in a frenzy, instantly forming a giant lightning net that encompassed his entire body. Lord Li let loose a howl of agony, and his suit of devilish armor was instantly destroyed by the ferocious barrage of golden lightning, and the seemingly indestructible layer of black scales also became completely dull and devoid of luster. The golden fist then opened up into a palm that plunged straight into Lord Li's chest, and the golden lightning erupting from the hand subsided, only to be replaced by a layer of silver flames that completely engulfed his body. No, Lord Li only had a chance to let loose one more howl of despair before his body was completely incinerated into ashes by the scorching silver flames. Even his nascent soul hadn't managed to escape. Only then did a golden humanoid figure emerge within the five-colored light. This was none other than Han Li, who had reverted back to his human form. His entire body was shimmering with scintillating golden light, and that was a clear sign that he had activated his Provenance true devil arts to its maximal extent. At this moment, the other two devilish beings had also arrived on the scene. The spiritual light around them faded, revealing the bald devilish being and his companion, and both of them were staring at the ball of scorching silver flames burning in front of Han Li with incredulity in their eyes. "Brother Han, did you just kill that devilish lord?" A surprised female voice also rang out from behind Han Li as fairy silver light arrived on the scene, then emerged from her shuttle with an astonished expression. "I was merely lucky, but it looks like we've got even more trouble on our hands now," Han Li said as he appraised the two devilish lords with a dark expression. As soon as his voice trailed off, he swept a hand through the air, and a clear cry immediately rang out from within the scorching silver flames. The silver fireball then transformed into a silver fire raven that was around 10 feet in length. The fire raven spread its wings and appeared above Han Li's head in a flash before circling around in the air a living creature, and both of the devilish lords were appraising it with wariness in their eyes. "How dare you kill Lord Li right under our noses? We're going to make sure to put an end to your lives here no matter what," the devilish being with the blue patterns on his face said in a frosty voice. As for his bald companion, he wasted no time with words as he immediately made a hand seal to conjure up layers of black devilish chi around his own body. The devilish chi then formed a series of small black shields, each of which was around a foot in size, and the shields situated themselves directly in front of the two devilish lords. Immediately thereafter, He raised his other hand to release a burst of azure light into the heavens, which transformed into a massive azure gate that hung in midair. The gate was around 100 feet tall and roughly 8 feet thick. The surface of the gate was covered in patches of rust, and there were two extremely menacing giant ghostly heads engraved on each half of the gate, striking the beholder with a bone-chilling sensation. Hanli's heart stirred slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately focused his gaze on this gate. As for the other devilish lord, he let loose a low roar and raised both hands up into the air to release a blue leather pouch that was around half a foot in size, as well as 13 streaks of black light. The leather pouch swelled drastically to around 10 feet in size, following which the opening was loosened, and over 100 balls of blue light rushed out from within it, then transformed into translucent blue flying snakes. Each snake was around 3 feet in length with a pair of transparent ice wings, and all of them were flicking their forked tongues incessantly. As for the 13 streaks of black light, they exploded almost as soon as they were released, transforming into 13 devilish flags enshrouded in dense black chi, and each flag was around 10 feet tall. These flags slowly unfurled themselves, and each flag contained an image of a half-naked woman standing on a mountain of bones. The women were all extremely lifelike and seductive in appearance. As soon as Fairy Silver Light caught sight of these treasures, her expressions changed drastically, and she exclaimed, "That's the Heavenly Usra Gate and a set of hierarchical true devil flags." Heavenly Usra Gate hierarchical true devil flags. Aren't those 2 of the 10 great devilish treasures of our spirit realm? Hanli asked in a rather surprised manner. Careful, Brother Han. The 10 great devilish treasures of our spirit realm are actually all replicas of renowned treasures of the Elder Devil realm, so those 2 treasures are most likely going to be even more powerful than the 10 great devilish treasures. It looks like we won't be able to take them down easily. How about we leave these 2 and continue on our journey? I'm sure they won't be willing to risk their lives to stop us, Fairy Silver Light suggested in a hesitant manner. It was quite clear that Fairy Silver Light wasn't optimistic about their chances against these powerful treasures, and was considering a retreat. It's too late. There's still a very long way to go until we reach Heavenly City. If we let these 2 go, the rest of our journey will be even more perilous. All you have to do is help me stall one of them for now, and I'll take them down one after another. Hanli transmitted his voice to her in response in an implacable manner. Fairy Silver Light was naturally aware that Hanli was right, and she was both surprised and elated by his confidence. Thus, after a brief moment of contemplation, she nodded and transmitted her voice in reply. "Seeing as you're confident in your ability to take care of these 2, then I'll do everything in my power to assist you. I'm going to summon a powerful treasure to trap one of them. The rest will be up to you, Brother Han." As soon as her voice trailed off, Fairy Silver Light made a rapid series of hand seals, and bright spiritual light erupted from her silver mask. Countless golden runes then emerged on the surface of the mask, and in the beginning, the runes were only around the size of grains of rice, but they quickly expanded to encompass the entire mask. She then let loose a delicate cry, and the silver mask warped slightly before sliding off her face. Immediately thereafter, it expanded to become the head of a beautiful woman that was around 10 feet in size. The head was shimmering with silver light with its eyes tightly shut, and had long golden hair that was several feet in length. "Attack!" A cold light flashed through the bald, devilish lord's eyes upon seeing this, and he immediately bit down onto the tip of his own tongue, then opened his mouth to expel a mouthful of black blood, which transformed into a cloud of blood mist that enshrouded the ghostly azure gate. After witnessing Hanli dismantling of Lord Li, the bald, devilish being had already cast aside all complacency, and he was sacrificing some blood essence from the get-go to activate this trump card treasure of his. In the instant that the giant azure gate was enveloped by the blood mist, the eyes of the 2 giant ghostly heads engraved onto its surface abruptly turned red, and they suddenly seemed to have sprung to life as they opened their mouths to devour the blood mist in the air. The massive rusty gate then became as bright red as blood, and an overwhelming odor of blood and gore permeated through the air. The 2 ghostly heads raised up toward the heavens and let loose shrill howls in unison, then pounced forward violently, each revealing half a ghostly body that extended all the way to their waists. After that, the 2 menacing ghosts extended a thick, powerful arm each and grabbed onto the black knocker. Symbol 361 degrees, symbol 35C, turn glottal stop, symbol 361 degrees, on each gate before pulling with all their might. A buzzing sound rang out from the giant gate as it was slowly pried open, and even though only a slight opening had appeared, there were already gusts of fierce yin winds erupting from the gate, alongside ghostly cries and bone-chilling howls. As for the other devilish lord, he had also sprung into action as soon as his companion had yelled the word, "Attack." He quickly made a hand seal, and all of the translucent flying snakes around him instantly began to hiss in unison. Ferocious looks appeared in their eyes as they opened their mouths to expel clouds of blue glacial chi, which quickly inundated all of their bodies. He then made another hand seal, and bursts of black chi began to surge out of the 13 devilish flags at his behest. The devilish flags rotated on the spot before transforming into 13 skeletons, each of which was roughly the same height as an adult human. Sinister crimson light flashed within their eyes, and as they twisted their bodies, peals of delightful female laughter rang out. The laughter was extremely peculiar, and even Han Li was struck by a sense of dizziness upon hearing it. However, there was still more to come. The laughter ringing out from the 13 skeletons suddenly ceased, and they flew toward the devilish being with blue patterns on his face in unison. As opposed to being alarmed by this, the devilish lord remained calm and collected, and he let loose a low cry before sweeping a sleeve through the air, releasing 13 crimson pills that he had prepared in advance. These pills were each around the size of an egg, and they seemed to be extremely alluring to the skeleton as they immediately changed directions to pursue the pills instead. The 13 pills were evenly shared among the 13 skeletons, and in the instant that the pills were devoured, bursts of crimson light instantly erupted from their bodies. The skeletons then began to dance with elation within the devilish chi, and peals of joyful laughter rang out once again. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D486, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A, letter 1D658, letter 1D664, letter 1D662. Immediately thereafter, the 13 skeletons abruptly twisted around, and the crimson light around them instantly formed blood and flesh over the skeletons. In the blink of an eye, 13 half-naked and extremely seductive devilish women had appeared, and all of them were extremely gorgeous and alluring. Han Li's pupils immediately contracted slightly upon seeing this. "Go," the devilish lord commanded as he made a hand seal, then thrust a finger toward Han Li in a vicious manner. The expressions on the faces of the 13 seductive women instantly changed as they quickly grew sharp nails that were several inches in length each, then pounced toward Han Li with ferocious killing intent. The blue flying snakes in the air also flapped their wings, and the blue glacial chi in the nearby area was all drawn into their bodies. As a result, they transformed into over 100 giant ice spikes, each of which was around 10 feet in length, then shot forth through the air like speeding arrows. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he immediately swept a sleeve through the air to release 72 small golden swords. These swords then instantly swelled to around 3 feet in length each before splitting up into hundreds of sword projections. The sword projections shuddered slightly before hurtling through the air, transforming into golden threads that directly opposed the oncoming ice spikes. As for the silver fire raven, it let loose a clear cry before spreading its wings and transforming into a giant fireball, then shot forth directly toward the 13 devilish women. In the instant that Han Li's battle against this devilish lord commenced, fairy silver light also gritted her teeth and lashed out toward the giant ghostly gate up ahead, which was still slowly being opened. The beautiful silver female head in front of her gradually opened its eyes at her behest, revealing a pair of golden eyes. At the same time, the female head also opened its mouth to expel a plume of translucent threads. The threads were completely unremarkable when they first emerged, but after just a single flash, they transformed into an enormous net that descended from above. The bald devilish lord was currently focusing all of his power on opening that giant gate, and his heart immediately stirred upon seeing this. His hand shot forth like lightning to point at the small black shields he had conjured up earlier, and these shields instantly swelled to become huge, translucent shield projections that linked up with one another seamlessly. Thus, a semi-spherical black light barrier appeared in the air above the bald devilish lord, encompassing both himself and the ghostly gate. As opposed to being alarmed by this, Fairy Silver Light seemed to be quite elated by this sight, and she immediately sent the giant net crashing down from above, encompassing the black light barrier, the bald devilish lord, and the ghostly gate. The net of threads then blurred and transformed into a dense light barrier that trapped everything beneath it, and at the same time, Fairy Silver Light pointed a finger at the female head hovering before her. Golden light flashed through the silver head's eyes, and bright dazzling light erupted from the golden runes on its face. These runes then shot forth one after another, before flying into the light barrier as specks of golden light, upon which a series of profound golden patterns immediately appeared on the surface of the barrier. Golden light flashed erratically from the light barrier, and the golden patterns on its surface quickly writhed and transformed, manifesting a giant shimmering golden formation within the span of just a few breaths. Only then did Fairy Silver Light heave a sigh of relief, and a faint smile appeared on her face. The bald, devilish lord's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, but a thought then seemed to occur to him, and he merely ignored the situation, choosing instead to increase the rate at which he was injecting magic power into the giant ghostly gate as a sinister smile appeared on his face. The crimson ghostly gate finally completely swung open amid a rumbling boom, and the two malicious ghosts that were prying the gate open immediately let loose cries of elation. Right at this moment, the unsettling howls and cries within the gate abruptly cut off, and gusts of bone-chilling yin winds began to sweep forth in a frenzy. However, this situation only lasted for a moment before an indistinct figure emerged from within the yin winds, then drifted out of the gate. Fairy Silver Light hurriedly focused her gaze on the figure, and the sight that she was greeted by had her feeling rather taken aback. This was a handsome young man in a set of scholarly robes. He certainly looked nothing like a legendary heavenly ghost. A hint of bewilderment appeared on Fairy Silver Light's face as these thoughts ran through her mind. In the next instant, the handsome young man looked around before suddenly turning to the bald, devilish lord with a faint smile. Tusk, you really are quite brave. I didn't think you would dare to summon me with this treasure again. Have you prepared a blood sacrifice? If it's not to be liking, you know the consequences that await you. Quit the chit-chat, Usra Monarch. Hurry up and summon the heavenly ghost. As long as you can kill these two, I'll definitely provide a satisfactory blood sacrifice to you. The bald, devilish lord replied in an urgent manner, then flipped a hand over to produce a long crimson saber. A vicious look then appeared in his eyes, and he brought the blade down in one powerful stroke, slicing off one of his own arms. The handsome young man's eyes immediately lit up at the sight of the dismembered arm, and he let loose a low cry, upon which his body swelled to around twice its original size, and he transformed into a giant ghostly monarch in a set of brocade robes with a golden crown on his head. His face had turned completely crimson in color, while his body was covered in green fur. There was also a row of bone spikes that were around a foot in length, each protruding from his back, and there were 4 menacing tusks extending out of his mouth. The ghostly monarch opened his mouth to expel a burst of gray chi that swept up the dismembered arm, then drew the arm into his own mouth before chewing on it amid a burst of wince-inducing cracks and crunches. The bald, devilish lord's face was slightly pale as he yelled, "All right, you've accepted my blood sacrifice, so hurry up and lend me your heavenly ghost badge." After swallowing the entire arm, the ghostly monarch licked his lips with a long purple tongue, then said with a greedy look in his eyes, "Hee, those two aren't ordinary beings. If you want me to summon the heavenly ghosts to assist you, then you'll need to offer a better sacrifice." "What? You're asking for far too much. I'm only asking you to take care of 2 measly human cultivators, yet you're still not satisfied even after devouring one of my arms." The bald, devilish lord immediately flared up with rage. "HMPH, you make it sound so simple. Can those 2 be compared with your past opponents? I'm most likely going to have to sacrifice many heavenly ghosts to take them down. It seems like you've already forgotten the pact that you made with me through this gate. Do you need me to refresh your memory?" the ghostly monarch asked in a menacing voice. The bald, devilish lord's expression darkened even further, and he gritted his teeth before lashing out with the crimson blade again, slicing off one of his own legs on this occasion. "This should be enough, right? If you dare to say no, I'm going to destroy the pact between us, even if it means we'll both end up with severe injuries." That is indeed enough." The ghostly monarch nodded in an ecstatic manner, then drew the dismembered leg into his own mouth as well. Meanwhile, the bald, devilish lord began to chant something, and bursts of black chi emerged from his self-inflicted wounds, following which new limbs quickly emerged. However, doing so made his complexion even paler than before. It was quite clear that even though he had regenerated his own limbs, the blood essence that he had lost would not be replenished so easily. After devouring the leg as well, the ghostly monarch let loose a long cry of elation, then swept a sleeve through the air to summon a crimson badge. He then tossed the badge behind himself while he flew into the ghostly gate as a gust of yin wind, vanishing in the blink of an eye. The bald, devilish lord's expression eased slightly at the sight of the badge, and after taking a glance at Han Li and Fairy Silver Light, he immediately pointed a finger at the badge. The ghostly badge immediately began to spin rapidly on the spot, quickly transforming into a crimson tornado. Ferocious cries rang out from within the tornado, and 4 menacing ghosts sprang out from within, then quickly swelled to over 100 feet in size each. These 4 giant ghosts had furless crimson bodies, but their bodily structure bore a strong resemblance to that of an ape. Each of them had a pair of black horns on their heads, as well as a green hooked tail. As they whipped those tails through the air, they became too fast for the naked eye to follow, and one could only hear bursts of explosive booms erupting from behind the giant ghosts. The bald, devilish lord immediately made a grabbing motion toward the 4 heavenly ghosts, and the crimson tornado in the distance immediately reverted back to a ghostly badge, then flew into his grasp in a flash. A vicious look then appeared on his face as he cast an incantation seal onto the badge while chanting something at the same time. The 4 giant ghosts were clearly bound by the badge, and they all turned to Fairy Silver Light with ferocious expressions at the bald, devilish lord's behest. One of them let loose a fierce cry, and crimson light emerged from the backs of all 4 heavenly ghosts. A pair of purple bat wings then appeared on each of their backs, and they immediately flapped those wings, pouncing directly toward the light barrier up above. A cold smile appeared on the bald, devilish lord's face upon seeing this. Having used the heavenly Usra gate on multiple past occasions, no one was more familiar than he was with just how fearsome these 4 heavenly ghosts were. Individually, each heavenly ghost was only at around the pinnacle of the spatial tempering stage, but when they joined forces, even a mid-body integration stage being would most likely be no match for them. The light barrier that had trapped them did indeed appear to be quite profound, but it would be no match for the 4 heavenly ghosts. Even so, the devilish lord still opened his mouth to expel a small black seal. When it first emerged, it was only several inches in size, but it quickly swelled to several tens of feet, then hurtled up toward the light barrier overhead with devastating force. The 4 heavenly ghosts reached the light barrier up above in a flash, then swung their arms through the air to conjure up countless claw projections. At the same time, they also whipped their hooked tails forward to manifest countless streaks of green light. The combined attacks of the 4 ghosts were truly formidable, and the light barrier was only able to last for a few moments before it began to dim. The bald, devilish lord was naturally ecstatic to see this, and he spurred on the giant black seal he had just summoned to strike the exact same spot on the light barrier. Black ripples immediately proliferated outward amid a resounding boom, and a crisp crack rang out, upon which countless thin white cracks appeared on the surface of the light barrier. It seemed to be on the verge of shattering. However, right at this moment, Fairy Silver Light suddenly flew over to the silver female head before her, then immediately thrust a palm toward it without any hesitation. The golden light in the silver head's eyes immediately shone even brighter, and it seemed to resonate with the light barrier down below. The golden formation on the light barrier emitted a loud buzzing sound, then released countless golden runes that vanished into the cracked barrier in a flash. A peculiar scene then ensued. In the instant that these golden runes surged into the light barrier, all of the cracks that riddled its surface were instantly sealed. A faint smile appeared on Fairy Silver Light's face upon seeing this. In contrast, the bald, devilish lord was furious, and he immediately let loose a loud cry before injecting his magic power into the ghostly badge in his hand and the giant seal upon above again. Crimson light swirled within the eyes of the 4 heavenly ghosts, and they let loose sharp cries of fury as their bodies expanded once again. At the same time, they opened their mouths to release pillars of crimson light while summoning the same claw projections and streaks of green light from before. As for the giant black seal, a rumbling thunderclap erupted from it, following which bolts of black lightning shot forth from its surface. At the same time, hundreds of silver runes also surged out from the underside of the seal. It was quite clear that the bald, devilish lord was unleashing the maximal extent of the seal's power. A torrential barrage of attacks struck the light barrier again, causing its surface to flash erratically with golden light. As the giant black seal struck the barrier for a second time, a black sun emerged amid an earth-shattering boom. The light barrier before the black sun was easily shattered, but then instantly regenerated amid another flash of bright golden light. The bald, devilish lord was extremely frustrated by this, but he continued to make a series of hand seals to spur on the four heavenly ghosts and the giant seal. He knew that no matter how powerful this light barrier was, there was no way it could keep up this instantaneous regeneration indefinitely. As long as he continued to persist with the attacks, it wouldn't take long before the barrier would be overwhelmed. Most importantly, his companion was facing the other human cultivator, who had just slain Lord Li, and the bald, devilish being was very concerned for his safety. Thus, as he was unleashing a relentless barrage of attacks against the light barrier, he turned to appraise the other battle in a slightly uneasy manner, upon which his expression changed drastically. There, a giant net comprised of countless golden sword threads had appeared, trapping all of the blue flying snakes within it. The flying snakes all had extremely resolute bodies and could expel profound glacial chi out of their mouths, but they were still quickly being shredded by the golden threads. Not far away from the golden net, the devilish women formed by the 13 skeletons had reverted back to their original forms. They were now giant skeletons that were around 20 feet tall each, with black devilish flame burning around their bodies. Murky poisonous mist was being released from their mouths, and streaks of glazed light were being blasted out of their eyes. Even though they were clearly fighting with all their might, they were still forced to frantically flee from a dozen or so shimmering golden beetles with purple patterns all over their bodies. The vastly renowned hierarchical true devils seemed to be extremely fearful of these insects and didn't dare to let them get close. At the same time, all of the devilish flames and poisonous mist they were releasing seemed to be completely ineffective against these beetles. Letter 1d4 BB, letter 1d633, letter 1d626, letter 1d626, letter 1d638, letter 212F, letter 1d624, letter 1d45C, letter 1d62E. As for Lord Lan himself, he was in an even sorrier state. The human cultivator he was facing had transformed into a giant golden ape that was over 1,000 feet tall, and he was wielding a pair of small mountains, forcing Lord Lan to stumble back in retreat with his devastating attacks. Lord Lan was both shocked and enraged by his opponent's overwhelming powers, and he was making a rapid series of hand seals as 7 different treasures flew frantically around him. However, no matter which treasure was struck by one of the 2 mountains, it would immediately be forced to fall back while another treasure took its place. Otherwise, if a single treasure were to take 3 or 4 consecutive blows from the mountains, it would most definitely be destroyed. Within mere moments from the commencement of the battle, Lord Lan was already being crushed. The bald, devilish lord drew a sharp breath upon seeing this. Those 13 hierarchical true devils were no less powerful than the 4 heavenly ghosts he had summoned, yet they had been reduced to such a sorry state by nothing more than a few spirit insects. It seemed that they had still underestimated the power of that male human cultivator. With his level of power, perhaps only the 3 or 4 devilish lords at the pinnacle of the body integration stage would be able to take him down. With that in mind, the bald devilish lord hurriedly transmitted his voice to his companion. After taking a dozen or so attacks from Han Li's mountains, sweat was pouring down Lord Lan's back, and his entire body was trembling as he stumbled back in retreat. After hearing what the bald, devilish lord had to say, he was immediately reinvigorated, and after transmitting his voice in an affirmative response, he immediately began to think of a way to detach himself from this battle. Blue light was flashing through Han Li's eyes, and he was able to clearly see the changes in expression on Lord Lan's face. He immediately harumphed coldly, then suddenly hurled his 2 mountains through the air. After leaving his hands, then 2 mountains swelled to over 1,000 feet tall each, and hurtled toward Lord Lan at an incredible speed. Even before they had actually reached Lord Lan, they were sweeping up gale force winds, and the nearby space was twisting and warping in the face of their power. Lord Lan's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, following which a vicious look appeared in his eyes. He suddenly gritted his teeth and abruptly pointed at 2 of the treasures hovering before him, then shot back in retreat with the rest of the treasures. Meanwhile, the 2 treasures he had just pointed at hurtled directly toward the 2 mountains, and in the instant that they came into contact with one another, the treasures instantly self-detonated amid an anguished wail. 2 resounding booms rang out as a pair of giant balls of light surfaced beneath the 2 mountains, and the mountains, seemingly unstoppable downward momentum, was momentarily stopped cold. However, in the next instant, the 2 mountains overwhelmed the balls of light and crushed them into nothingness. Immediately thereafter, Han Li appeared beneath the mountains in a wraith-like manner and casually raised his giant ape hands up into the air to catch them as if they weighed nothing more than a feather. After that, he cast his gaze several thousand feet up ahead with a cold expression, and he discovered that Lord Lan had taken advantage of the detonation of the pair of treasures to temporarily escape from Han Li. He was currently flying rapidly toward the small mountain down below, and at the same time, the 13 true devils being chased around by the purple-striped gold, devouring beetles were also hurtling toward the same direction as 13 balls of black devilish flames. The dozen or so purple-striped gold devouring beetles immediately set off in hot pursuit, and at this point, all but a few of the blue flying snakes had been eradicated by the countless sword threads. The flying snakes were an extremely rare type of devilish beast in the Elder Devil realm, but they were no match for the peerlessly sharp azure bamboo cloudswarm swords. They would have been a lot more powerful had they been unleashed in conjunction with a cultivation art that Lord Lan was supposed to use, but he had found himself completely unable to use the cultivation art, as he was too busy fending off attacks from Han Li. As such, even though Lord Lan was extremely reluctant to abandon those flying snakes, he had no choice but to do so. Han Li let loose a thunderous roar upon seeing this, and he abruptly stepped forward, covering a distance of several thousand feet in just a few flashes to take him directly above the small mountain. He then hurled his 2 mountains viciously downward again, while his giant ape hands clenched up into tight fists and unleashed a devastating barrage of fist projections. Curiously enough, in the face of such astonishing attacks, a hint of ecstasy flashed through Lord Lan's eyes as opposed to panic or horror. All of a sudden, he swept a sleeve through the air to release a black formation plate, which transformed into a black cloud that completely concealed his entire body. The 2 mountains crashed down with devastating force, instantly dispersing the black cloud, but Lord Lan was nowhere to be seen. Not only that, but a resounding boom erupted from the mountains around the small mountain down below, and each mountain released a pillar of black light, which then transformed into massive formation flags. Each flag was as thick as a water tank, and they extended all the way into the heavens like giant celestial pillars. A devilish formation that was around several kilometers in radius then emerged from the ground with the cluster of small mountains as the core of the formation. The entire sky darkened, and the surrounding space tremored as bursts of black devilish chi surged out of the mountains in a frenzy. Countless black runes took shape around Han Li, and the surrounding air tightened, upon which he was completely immobilized and left hovering in midair. Immediately thereafter, the black runes exploded in rapid succession to form countless black threads of light. The black threads flashed erratically before transforming into a series of inky black chains, and they instantly bound the giant ape in an extremely tight manner. At the same time, the black devilish chi down below rumbled and churned, then transformed into a series of giant tentacles that swept directly toward Han Li. Blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he displayed no fear whatsoever. Instead, he let loose a low roar, and all of his fur immediately stood up on end, while his body also expanded drastically. The black chains around him tremored violently as they were stretched to their limits, then shattered into countless pieces. A fierce look appeared on Han Li's face, and his arms swelled significantly in size as he raised them high up into the air above his head, while his fur shot forth as countless streaks of golden light. The streaks of golden light flashed through the air, sending ripples running through the surrounding space, and an invisible restriction was forcibly shattered. Han Li then made a grabbing motion with one hand, and a giant silver ruler appeared in his grasp. He swept the ruler behind him in a vicious manner without any hesitation, and a pillar of silver light erupted forth, vanquishing all of the oncoming devilish chi tentacles. All of a sudden, Lord Lan appeared on the summit of one of the small mountains, and his expression darkened slightly at the sight of the giant ape's ferocious display of power. He harumphed coldly as he swept a sleeve through the air to produce a glossy black gourd, which immediately tipped itself over to release several streaks of green light that vanished into the nearby devilish chi. After that, he flipped his other hand over to produce that black formation plate again, and he opened his mouth to expel a mouthful of blood essence that seeped into the plate as a cloud of blood mist. In the next instant, all of the destroyed tentacles regenerated back to their original condition and swept toward Han Li again. However, on this occasion, before the tentacles had even reached Han Li, several bone tridents shot forth from within them. Each bone trident was only around a foot in length, but their tips were of a sinister green color, and they were releasing a nauseating odor, clearly indicating that they were extremely poisonous. Han Li thumped his own chest with his massive ape fists upon seeing this, and an astonishing thunderclap rang out as arcs of golden lightning erupted from his body, forming a giant lightning net. Thunderclaps rang out in rapid succession, and all of the oncoming bone spikes faltered in their tracks upon striking the golden lightning. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Han Li raised his giant ape head and let loose a thunderous roar. In response, the golden lightning around him brightened even further, then swept through the surrounding area with devastating force. The bone tridents were struck by thick pillars of golden lightning almost at the exact same time, and even though they had clearly been refined using secret devilish techniques, there was no way they would be able to withstand a strike from so much divine devil-bane lightning. As such, they were instantly reduced to nothingness, and the giant tentacles were also reduced to clouds of mist in the wake of the golden lightning. Lord Lan faltered initially upon seeing this before a look of enlightenment and incredulity appeared on his face. That's divine devil-bane lightning. His voice was filled with shock and fury. Those bone tridents appeared to be quite ordinary, but they were actually treasures that even devilish lords had to be quite wary of. There weren't many things in the world that could counter them, but divine devil-bane lightning just so happened to be one of those things. Han Li threw his head back and chortled to the heavens as he clenched his fists before throwing a vicious punch toward the mountain that Lord Lan was standing on. Spatial fluctuations erupted as a golden fist that was around an acre in size appeared in the air above the small mountain, then crashed down with devastating force. Lord Lan's expression changed drastically as he immediately laid a hand over his black formation plate, summoning a burst of devilish chi that inundated his entire body. An earth-shattering boom erupted as the giant golden fist struck the small mountain, which tremored violently before crumbling into a huge pile of rubble. Meanwhile, a burst of devilish chi emerged out of thin air above another nearby mountain, and Lord Lan reappeared. He quickly cast his gaze toward the small mountain that had just been destroyed, and his expression darkened even further. At the same time, Han Li made a grabbing motion with both hands, and his two mountains appeared in his grasp again, before being hurled toward another two of the nearby small mountains. Those two mountains were also destroyed, and the devilish chi within the devilish formation immediately thinned noticeably. Lord Lan's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing this, following which a vicious look appeared in his eyes. "You're not breaking this formation. There's no way I'd let you escape from this place alive." As soon as his voice trailed off, he gritted his teeth and made a hand seal, upon which a dozen or so crimson pills flew out of his sleeves. The nearby devilish chi swirled, and 13 skeletons emerged before devouring the pills, then began to dance around Lord Lan in a frenzy. Meanwhile, Lord Lan himself abruptly laid a hand onto the top of his own head, and crimson light flashed from his body as his flesh and blood fell away, revealing another terrifying skeleton. Aside from a pair of eyeballs that were flashing with purple light, the skeleton was completely white and devoid of color. Its limbs were waving erratically through the air, and it was uttering an incantation in a shrill, piercing voice that induced goosebumps on the listener's skin. The 13 skeletons around it also raised their heads and let loose sharp cries in unison, then vanished into the skeleton at the center as bursts of black chi. That skeleton then began to swell drastically, and light swirled over every single inch of its bones as it began to undergo a peculiar transformation. A dull thump akin to a rumbling thunderclap rang out, and the skeleton swelled to around 700 to 800 feet in size. Black devilish flames erupted over its entire body, and it resembled a fiend celestial that had just descended from the heavens. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that there was a series of small skulls embedded onto the giant skeleton's sternum. The skulls were only several feet in size each, and there were 13 of them, clearly having been transformed from the 13 skeletons. What was even more astonishing was that, as the giant skeleton let loose a long cry, a burst of cracks and pops rang out, and 26 pairs of arms emerged from its back. Each arm was holding a different type of bone weapon, and as the weapons were swung through the air, howling devilish winds and scorching devilish flames swept through the surrounding area. This was the primary devil of the 13 hierarchical true devils, while its constituent skeletons were the secondary devils. However, this was a rather special method of cultivation, where Lord Lan had refined his own body to become the primary devil. The benefits of this included drastically enhancing his own powers, allowing him to master several types of powerful devilish abilities, and erasing the risk of suffering backlash from the secondary devils. However, if he were to sustain overly severe wounds in this form, his mind could be corrupted by the devilish power he had attained, and he would be permanently reduced to a mindless primary devil. As such, if it weren't for the fact that Han Li was far more powerful than he had anticipated, he wouldn't have taken the risk to adopt this primary devil body. As soon as he adopted this form, a sense of overwhelming bloodlust flooded into Lord Lan's mind, and the fear he held toward Han Li was completely erased. After letting loose a burst of sinister cackling, he abruptly opened his mouth to expel a burst of devilish wind toward Han Li from afar. The devilish wind was extremely cold and encompassed the entirety of heaven and earth. The primary devil then stepped forward, and its body instantly vanished into the gust of devilish wind. At this point, Han Li had already pulverized most of the small mountains nearby, using his own mountains as projectiles, and the mountain that the primary devil had been standing on before was the only one left. As the gust of devilish wind swept toward him, Han Li immediately hurled his pair of mountains forward once again. The two extreme mountains positioned themselves in front of him, and they began to swell drastically once again, reaching over 10,000 feet in height each. The devilish wind struck the two extreme mountains with tremendous force, and a thick layer of ice immediately took shape on the two mountains. Han Li stomped a foot onto the ground and launched himself onto the summit of one of the mountains, then peered carefully into the gust of devilish wind with blue light flashing in his eyes. In the next instant, he suddenly let loose a furious roar as his giant ape hands lashed out like lightning, sending countless golden fist projections hurtling toward a certain spot within the devilish wind. A burst of unsettling cackling rang out as countless giant blade projections emerged from within the devilish wind, and the surfaces of these blade projections were all riddled with crimson runes. The seemingly indestructible golden fist projections were all sliced apart one after another, following which the blade projections continued on toward Han Li. The blue light in Han Li's eyes brightened even further upon seeing this, and he suddenly waved a hand through the air. 13 giant golden flowers immediately flew toward him before transforming into his 13 purple-striped gold-devouring beetles. They had been trapped momentarily by the restriction within the devilish formation, and they had only just managed to free themselves. Without requiring any instructions from Han Li, the 13 beetles expanded drastically to several tens of feet in size each, then instantly conjured up countless projections that appeared before Han Li like countless purple shields. The blade projections were extremely sharp, but all of them merely vanished amid dull thumps upon striking the beetles. With how resolute the bodies of the purple-striped gold-devouring beetles were, there really was barely anything in this world that could truly destroy them, and those blade projections were no exception. Right at this moment, a giant vortex appeared in the air above Han Li, following which a huge black figure descended from above. The black figure was wielding 26 bone weapons and enveloped in a sea of black flames. The primary devil that Lord Lan had transformed into was unleashing a sneak attack on Han Li. However, Han Li seemed to have anticipated this in advance and wasn't alarmed in the slightest. He abruptly took a deep breath, and a suit of black armor appeared over his body amid a burst of churning black chi, and countless black runes erupted from the suit of armor to protect him. He then rubbed his hands together before separating them and raising them up into the air, casting a giant net of lightning that erupted toward the descending sea of devilish flames. The black devilish flames and golden lightning clashed amid a resounding boom, and both were instantly significantly diminished as if they were direct counters to one another. Meanwhile, the 26 giant bone weapons came crashing down toward Han Li's head without any hesitation. A cold smile suddenly appeared on Han Li's face, and golden light erupted behind him as a golden projection with 3 heads and 6 arms emerged. The projection swung its 6 arms through the air and released 6 balls of golden light. The balls of light converged above Han Li, then transformed into a golden vortex that was around an acre in size. This was none other than the revolving golden light. Under the smokescreen provided by the dazzling golden vortex, a faint green figure also shot forth from Han Li's body, then vanished into the nearby devilish chi. Meanwhile, waves of golden light were being released by the rapidly revolving golden vortex, and these golden waves instantly encompassed all of the oncoming bone weapons. At the same time, the golden projection behind Han Li let loose a low cry, and a burst of enormous suction force erupted from the golden waves. The bone weapons in the hands of the primary devil tremored violently in the face of this suction force, then quickly flew out of the primary devil's grasp and directly toward the golden vortex. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, clearly quite surprised that he had managed to disarm the primary devil so easily. In the next instant, a burst of sinister cackling rang out from the primary devil, and it abruptly pointed a finger toward the 26 bone weapons. Just as the weapons were about to be drawn into the golden vortex, they suddenly converged and released a burst of piercing gray light. In the blink of an eye, a giant bone lotus flower took shape, and every single bone petal was riddled with countless runes that were radiating unsettling gray light. The giant bone lotus revolved on the spot, and released countless blades of light that shot forth in a torrential barrage. All of the golden waves were sliced apart before the blades hurtled directly toward the golden vortex, but the revolving golden light was an incredibly powerful ability that Han Li had only attained after achieving full mastery of the Provenant's true devil arts, so it naturally wasn't going to be broken so easily. The three heads of the golden projection behind him began to chant in unison, and it was also casting a rapid string of incantation seals into the vortex with its 6 hands. A loud rumbling sound immediately rang out from within the golden vortex, and the golden waves erupting from it instantly became even more powerful, forming a stalemate with the blades of light released by the bone lotus. The purple light in the primary devil's eyes brightened upon seeing this, seemingly frustrated by Han Li's tenacious resistance. It abruptly reached toward itself with its 26 hands, pulling out a thick bone each, which transformed into another set of 26 weapons that were swept toward Han Li again. Letter 1D6-8F, letter 1D4-2B, letter 1D6-8T, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D5-6-8, letter 1D4-1E, letter 1D5-5-4, letter 1D4-2-8, letter 1D5-FA. Han Li thumped his own chest with his giant ape fists upon seeing this, then opened his mouth to expel a pillar of golden light. At the same time, he rose up to clash with the primary devil with his bare fists, relying on the incredible defensive prowess of his suit of devilish armor to hold his own in melee combat. Right at this moment, the 13 purple-striped gold-devouring beetles also pounced toward the giant primary devil, but the primary devil let loose a low roar as the 13 skulls detached themselves from its sternum, then flew directly toward the 13 beetles with green light erupting out of their mouths. This green light wasn't able to harm the purple-striped gold-devouring beetles, but it was imbued with some kind of peculiar power that managed to temporarily trap the beetles. All of a sudden, the golden projection ceased its chanting and also withdrew its hand seals, and its body took on a substantial form. A burst of black chi then emerged from its middle head, revealing itself to be a black nascent soul that was several inches tall. The nascent soul was completely identical to Han Li in appearance, and it was holding a blade segment with both hands. It looked up at the primary devil with a cold light in its eyes, then harumphed coldly as it disappeared into the middle head of the golden body again. In the next instant, the golden body's 3 heads moved in unison, and it flipped over one of its hands, upon which the blade segment that the black nascent soul had been holding a moment ago appeared in its grasp. The blade segment had expanded to over 10 times its original size to match the size of the golden body's hand, and the golden body's 3 heads began to chant in unison again. As it did so, it waved its other 5 arms through the air, sending countless golden runes raining down upon the blade segment, which began to radiate rings of 5-colored light. At the same time, a burst of power of laws of heaven and earth filled the entire space. Under the influence of this power of laws, the final small mountain nearby crumbled into rubble amid a resounding boom. All of the fierce winds sweeping through the devilish formation dissipated, and all of the devilish chi in a radius of several tens of kilometers quickly thinned out. Countless specks of 5-colored light began to appear before surging toward the blade segment in a frenzy, and the incomplete blade segment suddenly became whole again. Letter 1D627, letter 1D633, letter 1D626, letter 212F, letter 1D4CC, letter 1D626, letter 1D4B8, letter 1D630, letter 1D4C2. A faint buzzing sound rang out from the purple blade, and the fluctuations of power of laws intensified even further. As for the specks of 5-colored light that hadn't yet surged into the blade, they all transformed into 5-colored runes. A cold smile appeared on the golden body's face, and it aimed the purple blade up at the primary devil overhead, while roughly doubling its rate of injection of 5-colored light into the purple blade. Due to the enormous amount of 5-colored light passing through it, the arm that was wielding the purple blade had turned into a rainbow color, and a terrifying aura that threatened to destroy heaven and earth erupted from the blade. As more and more of the world's origin chi was injected into the blade, this aura became even more fearsome. The primary devil that was battling Han Li in the distance shuddered upon sensing this terrifying aura, and the violent killing intent of the primary devil significantly abated as the logic of Lord Lan returned. The giant skeleton immediately hurled its 26 bone weapons through the air without any hesitation, then quickly pointed at the weapons, upon which they converged to form a sinister-looking blade that was several hundred feet in length. The giant blade came crashing down from above, while the primary devil shot back in retreat, flying back to over 1,000 feet away in a flash. However, right at this moment, spatial fluctuations erupted near the primary devil, and a huge green hand shot forth like lightning to grip onto its shoulder in a completely unexpected turn of events. The primary devil was naturally extremely alarmed by this, but a ferocious look then appeared in its eyes as it expelled a burst of devilish flames out of its mouth. The huge black hand was set alight and was quickly charred into a blackened state, but it displayed no intention of letting go. Green light flashed several times in rapid succession, and not only did the hand completely regenerate to its original condition, it was now gripping even more tightly onto the primary devil's shoulder. Only then did the primary devil begin to panic. It swung several of its arms through the air in unison, and then transformed into a dozen or so bone blades that slashed toward the giant green hand. A string of sickening cracks rang out in rapid succession as each of the bone blades sliced around a foot deep into the huge hand, but they were unable to progress any further. This green hand was much more resolute than even the average treasure. The primary devil was truly growing very alarmed now, and it let loose a loud roar as its body disassembled into countless bones in an instant. The giant green hand was still holding tightly onto 7 or 8 of its bones, but the rest of the skeleton converged several tens of feet away in its complete form, and it seemed that those missing bones hadn't affected its body at all. However, during this split-second delay, the Provenant's golden body down below had already finished what it was doing. Golden runes appeared on the surface of the purple blade before it was slashed toward the primary devil up above. A tremendous burst of power of laws instantly erupted from the blade, transforming into a giant black wave that surged through the air, reaching the primary devil in a flash. The primary devil was extremely alarmed by this, and the devilish flames around its body swelled drastically before sweeping toward the massive wave. At the same time, a burst of loud cracks and pops erupted from its body as hundreds of bone blades emerged before flying through the air amid the devilish flames. A peculiar scene then ensued. In the instant that the devilish flames and massive bone blades came into contact with the giant black wave, they were all erased from existence in a completely silent manner. The primary devil was horrified to see this, and it attempted to flee the scene, but it was completely immobilized by the power of laws in the air around it. Thus, the massive primary devil was completely inundated by the giant black wave in an instant, and it was completely wiped off the face of this realm. In the instant that the primary devil was destroyed, the skulls locked in combat with the purple-striped gold-devouring beetles, and the giant bone lotus that was opposing the golden vortex all disintegrated into plumes of black smoke. In the next instant, the power of laws in the surrounding space also vanished along with the massive black wave, and it was as if nothing had ever happened. After unleashing the power of the purple blade segment, the light radiating from the golden body had dimmed significantly, clearly indicating that it had expended a lot of power as well. At this moment, a green figure flashed nearby, and a green-skinned Han Li calmly emerged out of thin air. This was none other than the spirit body that Han Li had refined using that immortal Xianxia, and it was being controlled by Quer. Even though Quer wasn't very powerful at all, the spirit body didn't reject her as she was also a spirit being of heaven and earth. As such, she was able to control the spirit body to great effect. Having been nurtured for centuries by the green liquid from Han Li's mysterious small vial, the spirit body had reached the pinnacle of the early body integration stage. With Quer's current powers, she was only able to realize a fraction of the spirit body's potential, but it still proved to be an extremely valuable ally to Han Li. Only after it had momentarily trapped the primary devil was the golden body able to kill it with a single strike using the blade segment. Otherwise, with the primary devil's array of peculiar abilities, it would not have been easy for Han Li to kill it in a short time. After the primary devil was slain, the golden body and spirit body both vanished into the giant ape's body as a ball of golden light and a green shadow, respectively. After that, golden light flashed from the giant ape's body, and it quickly shrank down as Han Li reverted back to his human form. A faint smile appeared on his face as he heaved a faint sigh of relief, but right at this moment, an earth-shattering boom suddenly erupted from another direction. At the same time, several bursts of astonishing bone-chilling auras erupted into the heavens from the same direction. The smile on Han Li's face instantly faded, and he turned toward the other battle with a cold expression. At this point, the entire devilish formation had already crumbled, and the black devilish chi had all dissipated, so everything within where the devilish formation once stood was revealed. The giant light barrier that had trapped the bald devilish being and the 4 heavenly ghosts had already been shattered, and the devilish lord had emerged in midair alongside the heavenly ghosts. The 4 heavenly ghosts wore their usual vicious expressions, but the bald devilish lord's expression had become extremely strained. He could see that the devilish formation they had painstakingly set up had been completely destroyed, and Lord Lan's aura had also vanished without a trace, so he was naturally very alarmed and bewildered. As an acquaintance of Lord Lan, he was naturally aware of the hierarchical true devils that Lord Lan had cultivated. He knew that, when fully unleashed, the hierarchical true devils were even more powerful than the 4 heavenly ghosts he had summoned. It had only taken him a very short time to break through the light barrier he had been trapped under, but during this time, Lord Lan had been slain even after using his hierarchical true devils, and that was astonishing to the bald devilish lord. In the instant that the light barrier was shattered, Fairy Silver Light threw up several mouthfuls of blood, and her face became deathly pale. It was quite clear that she had paid a very heavy price to keep the bald devilish lord trapped within her light barrier. Han Li turned toward the bald devilish lord, and a cold look appeared in his eyes. However, before he had a chance to do anything, the devilish lord suddenly made a hand seal and fled the scene as a streak of black light. He had made a snap decision to flee seeing, as the situation had taken a dramatic turn for the worse. The 4 heavenly ghosts were also swept up into the streak of black light, and as for the heavenly Usra gate, it merely vanished as soon as the devilish lord fled the scene, as if it were nothing more than a projection. Han Li harumphed coldly as he narrowed his eyes, then made a hand seal to release the 13 purple-striped gold-devouring beetles out of his sleeve again. At the same time, a thunderclap erupted behind Han Li, and a pair of translucent wings emerged on his back. He then transformed into his giant 4-winged Tian Peng form and quickly sped away into the distance as an arc of silver lightning. In the blink of an eye, the giant bird and the black streak of light had vanished into the distant sky, and Fairy Silver Light immediately heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing that Han Li's speed outstripped that of the black streak of light. She knew that in her current state, she wouldn't be of any help to Han Li even if she were to give chase, so she simply remained where she was. She quickly pulled a jade vial out of her storage bracelet and consumed 7 or 8 pills at once. As a result, she was quite reinvigorated, but a slightly unnatural flush had appeared on her face. After that, she turned toward the piles of rubble where the devilish formation had once stood, and a contemplative look appeared in her eyes. Around an hour later, a streak of azure light returned. The azure light faded, and Han Li emerged in an expressionless manner, then dropped a round object from above, which landed right in front of Fairy Silver Light. The object gave off an overwhelming stench of blood and gore, and it was the head of one of the heavenly ghosts. Translation: Ooga booga me strong me kill ghost, me want snoo snoo right now. The heavenly ghost's vicious expression was still etched on its face, but there was a hint of lingering astonishment in its wide eyes. It was as if the heavenly ghost had seen something unbelievable in the instant that it had been decapitated. "Brother Han, did you chase down that devilish lord?" Fairy Silver Light asked as she glanced down at the heavenly ghost head in a stunned manner. "Rest assured, I've already taken care of him and the 3 other heavenly ghosts." A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face, and he swept a sleeve through the air to release a ball of black light, within which was a miniature azure gate that was several inches in size. This was none other than the bald devilish lord's heavenly Usra gate. However, the light that was currently radiating from it was quite dim, suggesting that it seemed to have been damaged. "That's great. With all of them dead, there's no way the Elder Devil race will hear about our trip to Heavenly City. It was all thanks to you that we were able to kill those 3 devilish lords, Brother Han. If Ling Long hadn't told me about you all those years ago, I would truly be unable to believe that you've only been cultivating for just over 2,000 years, Fairy Silver Light said with both elation and awe in her voice. "I was merely lucky. The cultivation arts I use just so happen to suppress most devilish and ghostly cultivation arts. Compared to other fellow Taoists of the same cultivation base, my powers will be nowhere near as prominent. Speaking of which, don't forget what you promised me, Han Li said in a meaningful voice. Rest assured, Brother Han, I made a promise and I plan to deliver. Ling Long and I are both from the same race, so it won't be too difficult for me to pass on a message to her in your stead. It's just that Ling Long is currently with Senior Ao Zio, and I can't get into contact with her for now, Fairy Silver Light replied. I'll have to thank you in advance then, fellow Taoist Silver Light. If you need my assistance with anything else in the future, feel free to call on me, Han Li said with a smile. Fairy Silver Light's eyes lit up with elation upon hearing this, and she replied, You're very welcome, Brother Han. This is just a simple task for me. Han Li was far more powerful than she had anticipated and wasn't inferior even to a late body integration cultivator in the slightest. With a favor from such a powerful being up her sleeve, she would definitely be able to benefit immensely from it at a later date. After a brief discussion, both of them erased all traces of the nearby battlefield, then continued on toward Heavenly City. Han Li was flying through the air at a leisurely pace within a streak of azure light, and he was gently stroking a white wooden box within one of his sleeves with a contemplative look in his eyes. This wooden box was something that he had obtained from the bald devilish being, whom he had slain using his blade segment again. Initially, he wasn't all that interested in the item, and only after discovering that neither his spiritual sense nor his spirit eye ability could allow him to glean its contents did he become very curious toward it. However, an extremely powerful formation had been set up on this box, making it very difficult for him to open it even with his vast array of abilities. As such, Han Li stowed the item away and hurried back to where Fairy Silver Light was. As he was stroking the wooden box, he could feel faint traces of heat being released from its surface, but less than 10 minutes later, it suddenly became very cool to the touch, and that made Han Li even more intrigued by its contents. However, they were currently still traveling, so he would just have to wait until they reached Heavenly City before studying the wooden box further. With that in mind, Han Li released a crimson bead from each of his 5 fingers, which then vanished into the wooden box in a flash as 5 crimson runes. This was a restriction he had learned from a certain foreign race, and he had cast it onto the wooden box as a safety precaution. Immediately thereafter, the wooden box was stowed away into his storage bracelet amid a flash of azure light, and he focused his entire attention on flight. At his and Fairy Silver Light's current speeds, they were quickly able to cover a distance of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Meanwhile, within a newly constructed devilish city that was countless kilometers away, there was a hall situated within one of the massive pyramids. All of a sudden, a thunderous roar of fury erupted from within the hall. What happened? How did 3 devilish lords fail to transport a single item? Do those 3 pieces of trash want to be thrown into the devil form pond? The one who had spoken was a crimson-robed young man sitting in the main seat at the center of the hall. It was none other than the clone of sacred ancestor Zhu Guang, and his face was currently etched with fury. This clone was only at the pinnacle of the body integration stage, but in his burning fury, a giant devilish projection that was over 100 feet tall abruptly appeared behind him. The projection was completely crimson in color with a dozen or so horns on its head. At the same time, there were several thick tentacles extending from its body and whipping wildly through the air, making it appear as if it were a giant octopus. The terrifying aura released by the devilish projection was causing the entire hall to creak and tremor violently, as if it were going to collapse at any moment. In the face of this terrifying aura, the black-armored guards in the hall hurriedly half-knelt onto the ground and lowered their heads with horrified expressions, not daring to look up at sacred ancestor Zhu Guang. There were only 2 high-grade devilish beings standing near sacred ancestor Zhu Guang, and they immediately exchanged a bewildered glance upon seeing this. One of the 2 was a man in a baggy silver robe, and he asked, "What made you so angry, Master Zhu Guang?" The fury on sacred ancestor Zhu Guang's face quickly faded, but his voice was still very heavy as he replied, "I asked 3 of my subordinates to transport something very important, but the wisp of spiritual sense I left on that item has been cut off by a secret technique. Something must have happened to those 3. Otherwise, there's no way the item would have been lost." The other high-grade devilish being was a pink-robed, middle-aged beauty, and she said in a bewildered manner, "Is that so? That seems very implausible. With 3 devilish lords traveling together, they should be able to protect themselves even against a human cultivator at the pinnacle of the body integration stage. As for that grand ascension stage human cultivator, he was wounded by several sacred ancestors when he ventured into our sacred realm around 1,000 years ago, so surely he won't appear at a time like this. It is indeed quite incredible to think that the 3 of them could have perished all at once, but it's not impossible for someone to have simply taken the treasure from them. I just tried to contact them using a secret technique, but there was no response. Someone go check if any devilish lord-level soul flames have been snuffed out in the soul hall, sacred ancestor Zhu Guang instructed with a dark expression. Yes, sacred ancestor. One of the black-armored guards immediately extended a respectful bow before backing out of the hall. Sacred ancestor Zhu Guang leaned back in his seat and fell silent as he narrowed his eyes slightly. The 2 high-grade devilish beings were naturally aware that he was in a foul mood and didn't dare to speak either. Thus, the entire hall became deathly silent. Around 10 minutes later, the black-armored figure rushed into the hall again, then half-knelt onto the ground and reported in a slightly panicked manner, "Sacred ancestor, the soul flames of 3 devilish lords have been snuffed out in quick succession." 3. Sacred ancestor Zhu Guang's eyes immediately widened, and one of the armrests of his chair was instantly crushed into dust in his white-knuckled grip amid a dull thump. Yes, sacred ancestor. The supervisor of the Soul Hall has confirmed that these 3 soul flames belong to Lord Lan's trio, the guard replied in a careful manner. Upon receiving this news, sacred ancestor Zhu Guang was looking like a volcano that was on the brink of eruption. The 2 high-grade devilish beings in the hall also exchanged an astonished glance upon hearing this. However, both of them could tell that sacred ancestor Zhu Guang was more enraged by the fact that the aforementioned item had been lost, rather than the deaths of the 3 devilish lords. This made them both rather curious about just what this item was. Sacred ancestor Zhu Guang sat in a brooding silence for a long while before finally making a decision. "You too, lead a group of bloodlight crystal guards and set off right away to find the place where those 3 were killed. Even if a grand ascension cultivator had been responsible, there must still have been signs of battle left behind. Carefully examine every single inch of soil there, and be sure to verify the identity and whereabouts of the human cultivators responsible. Drop all your other duties for now and prioritize this one above all else. Contact me as soon as you find any useful information." "Yes, Master Zhu Guang." The pair of high-grade devilish beings immediately accepted their orders with a respectful bow. An hour later, a crimson cloud flew out of a certain level of the pyramid, and sinister devilish beings in suits of translucent crimson armor could be seen within the cloud. There were over 100 such beings in total, and they quickly vanished into the distance. Over a month later, 2 streaks of light shot forth in an extremely discreet manner toward a giant human city constructed beside a lake. After just a few flashes, the 2 streaks of light landed on a nameless mountain nearby. They were none other than Han Li and Fairy Silver Light, who had finally made it to the general vicinity of Heavenly City. Both of them were currently appraising Heavenly City with grim expressions. In the air in front of one of Heavenly City's city walls, there were tens of thousands of giant black arcs hovering in midair, and between these arcs were countless ferocious devilish cavaliers. The devilish beast steeds of these cavaliers had black clouds beneath their feet and were fitted with suits of beastly armor, clearly setting them apart from those normal devilish beasts. Those are the all-encompassing devilish cavaliers. The rumors were correct. The elder devil race only sent armies of low-grade devilish beasts to attack our deep heaven city, but they've sent out their truly elite forces to wipe out the other human settlements in the area. These all-encompassing devilish cavaliers are mostly only at the core formation stage or nascent soul stage, but after fusing as one with their devilish steeds through the use of a devilish secret technique, their powers will be multiplied, and human cultivators of the same cultivation base definitely wouldn't be a match for them. Even a deity transformation or spatial tempering stage being would be forced to flee if they were to be attacked by a large group of these cavaliers. Also, I heard that they're very adept in combination techniques, and a devilish formation set up by over 10,000 of these cavaliers will pose quite a threat even to cultivators of our caliber. There appears to be over 100,000 all-encompassing devilish cavaliers here, so it's no wonder that Heavenly City is desperately asking for reinforcements, Fairy Silver Light said in a grim manner. The all-encompassing devilish cavaliers aren't the most troublesome things to deal with. It's those guys. Han Li's lips twitched slightly as he pointed toward a cluster of giant black arcs. There were some armored devilish beings near the arcs with beastly lower bodies and human upper bodies. At the same time, they each had 3 different heads and 6 arms. The middle heads were all completely identical to those of normal humans, and they were all handsome male heads or gorgeous female heads. However, the other 2 heads were extremely terrifying to behold and resembled those of malicious ghosts. They were all holding different weapons in their 6 hands, and even though they numbered far fewer than the devilish cavaliers, the collective baleful aura they were releasing was extremely astonishing. Furthermore, there were a series of glowing gray projections behind them, and upon closer inspection, Han Li discovered them to be projections of giant ferocious beasts. The largest of these projections were over 1,000 feet in size, and even the smallest ones were over 100 feet in stature. These devilish beings all wore cold expressions, and seemed to be completely devoid of emotions. Those are the Jilun war devils. There are only a few thousand of them, but Heavenly City truly is in trouble here, Fairy Silver Light said as she drew a sharp breath. I presume these Jilun war devils have played a big role in the deaths of Heavenly City's 2 grand elders, Han Li said with a grim expression. Apparently, Jilun war devils rank in the top 5 even among the elite forces of the Elder Devil race. If those 2 fallen fellow Taoists had been trapped by these devils before being attacked by other devilish lords, then it would have indeed been very difficult for them to escape. I really want to see just how powerful these war devils are in action, Fairy Silver Light mused. Hee, it seems that your wish is about to come true, Han Li suddenly chuckled. Almost at the exact same moment, a burst of buzzing suddenly rang out from the giant black arcs, following which almost every single one of them released countless black pillars of light that hurtled directly toward the giant city wall up ahead in a frenzy. A string of resounding booms rang out, and formations of all different colors emerged on the surface of the slightly damaged city wall. These formations conjured up layers of shimmering light barriers that managed to withstand the powerful pillars of black light, which exploded into violent black ripples that made the entire sky dim significantly. Right at this moment, the sound of rumbling war drums rang out from the arcs, following which over 100 mountainous giant beasts emerged from the battle arcs. Each of these devilish beasts were over 1,000 feet in size, and they appeared to be massive black rhinoceroses that were crashing directly toward the city wall, looking as if they were planning to use their bodies as battering rams. At the same time, all types of low-grade devilish beasts surged out of the other giant arcs in a frenzy, then surged toward the city wall like a devilish wave. Dense devilish chi surged through the entire heaven, and countless beasts roared in unison. Countless human warriors appeared atop the city wall and unleashed attacks such as fireballs, ice spikes, and wind blades toward the oncoming devilish army using some crossbow-like weapons. The devilish beasts at the forefront of the devilish wave were quickly felled by these attacks, having either been reduced to masses of mangled blood and flesh, or incinerated into charcoal, or frozen into ice blocks. Tens of thousands of low-grade devilish beasts were slain in an instant, and the momentum of the entire attack seemed to have been halted momentarily. However, those giant rhinoceros-like beasts paid no heed at all to the oncoming attacks. They each conjured up a layer of extremely dense yellow light around their bodies, and the attacks being aimed at them were unable to pierce through these light barriers. Thus, all of these giant beasts arrived in front of the city wall in the blink of an eye, then aimed their inky black horns toward the city wall. Black halos of light instantly appeared on the horns of these devilish beasts, following which they abruptly shook their heads, and the halos instantly vanished as a result. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted on the surface of the giant city wall, and these black halos erupted out of thin air before viciously striking the protective formations on the surface of the city wall. In the face of these black halos, the light barriers formed by the formations were torn apart with ease, following which giant rifts were torn into the wall. The human warriors who were unfortunate enough to be struck by these black halos were all instantly reduced to dust, and the warriors near them were naturally very alarmed to see them. Some of them attempted to get down from the city wall in a panicked manner, but right at this moment, bursts of light suddenly appeared above their heads. Head-sized yellow crystal balls then emerged from these bursts of light, then released threads of yellow light that swept through the air. The retreating human warriors were instantly decapitated by these threads of light, and their headless bodies slumped to the ground. Deserters, those who refuse to follow orders, and those who aren't giving their all will be killed on the spot. A bone-chilling voice echoed over the city wall, following which several armor-clad nascent soul cultivators emerged from the bursts of light up above. Each of them had 5 yellow crystal balls revolving around them, and they all wore steely expressions. Following their emergence, the human warriors could only continue to oppose the devilish army with all their might, and as a result of their desperate efforts, even the giant rhinoceros beasts were forced to a standstill. At the same time, a profound incantation rang out from within the city, and a series of huge blue formations emerged behind the city wall. Immediately thereafter, bolts of blue lightning sprang out of these formations amid a string of rumbling thunderclaps. The bolts of lightning formed a series of massive lightning nets, each of which was several thousand feet in size, and they descended toward the other side of the city wall. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D493, letter 1D4E, letter 1D486, letter 1D500, letter 1D486, letter 1D484, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D4F6. Countless low-grade devilish beasts, as well as many giant rhinoceros beasts, were caught under the explosions of these nets of lightning, resulting in the emergence of a series of giant blue lightning clouds. The low-grade devilish beasts were instantly destroyed, and even the dense light barriers around the giant rhinoceros beasts were torn apart. The bolts of lightning struck their enormous bodies in a frenzy, causing them to roar with agony as large sections of their bodies were charred black. However, these giant beasts truly possessed astonishing vitality. Not only were these lightning strikes unable to kill them, they seemed to have only enraged the beasts further. They swung their heads vigorously through the air, releasing several more black halos that surged toward the city wall, and an earth-shattering boom rang out as a section of the giant city wall finally collapsed. Through this gap in the city wall, one could even see the backup army of human warriors in the city. These human warriors were all deathly pale, but they were forced to maintain their formation by the intimidation of the law-enforcing nascent soul cultivators up above. Meanwhile, the general of the devilish army was becoming very impatient. A sharp, piercing cry erupted straight into the heavens from one of the giant black arcs, and the cry was filled with unadulterated killing intent. Cold light flashed through the eyes of the devilish cavaliers near the arc, and they all began to converge together into massive groups. From a distance, it looked as if several black seas had suddenly appeared in the air, and they were setting up complex formations as they slowly advanced toward Heavenly and City. The devilish cavaliers and their devilish beast steeds all began to release a vast amount of inky black devilish chi, and the sun up above was quickly completely concealed by a black devilish sea. Some of the giant arcs suddenly blasted forth pillars of purple light that instantly vanished into the bodies of the giant rhinoceroses, and their injuries were completely healed within the span of just a few breaths. Their eyes then turned bright red in response to the sharp cry that had just erupted behind them, and they crashed through the oncoming attacks as they charged directly toward the gap in the city wall. Under the cover of these giant rhinoceroses, the army of low-grade devilish beasts was also finally able to advance toward Heavenly and City as well. As such, the situation had become extremely perilous for Heavenly and City. Right at this moment, spiritual light flashed several times in rapid succession from the gap in the city wall, and groups of human cultivators suddenly appeared, then frantically waved the formation flags they were holding through the air. A string of loud rumbling rang out as giant bricks of different colors came raining down from above, completely filling the gap in the blink of an eye. Not only were these bricks remarkably huge, they were all as smooth and lustrous as jade, clearly having been specially refined. After they blocked the opening in the city wall, the cultivators up above immediately cast incantation seals toward them, and they immediately fused with the rest of the city wall in a seamless manner. In the instant that the opening in the city wall vanished, the surfaces of several giant buildings in Heavenly and suddenly blurred, following which countless runes emerged from them. These runes swirled through the air before forming a series of profound formations of different sizes, and immediately thereafter, these buildings transformed into giant stone puppets amid a string of rumbling booms. Each puppet was completely devoid of facial features aside from a huge single eye, and there was a house-sized opening on each of their bellies. Within each of those openings were several human cultivators standing on a heptagram, holding strange treasures with nervous looks on their faces. These giants abruptly threw their heads back and let loose thunderous roars, then immediately rushed over to the city wall before rubbing their hands together. A gust of fierce glacial wind swept forth, and countless specks of blue light appeared within the glacial wind before converging toward their palms. In the blink of an eye, a series of translucent ice spears that resembled 1,000-feet-long pillars appeared. The giant puppets grabbed onto the spears, then hurled them violently through the air, upon which they instantly vanished amid flashes of blue light. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted in the air above the giant rhinoceroses, and over 1,000 streaks of piercing blue light emerged out of thin air. These streaks of blue light then transformed into 1,000-feet-long ice spears that pierced through the rhinoceroses' mountainous bodies before exploding violently. Following their explosions, the spears transformed into clouds of blue mist that were several acres in size, sealing the severely wounded rhinoceroses into gargantuan ice statues. The yellow protective light barriers around their bodies had completely failed to protect them. Loud thunderclaps then erupted as over 100 massive bolts of crimson lightning crashed down from above, piercing through the dense devilish chi without any warning before shattering all of the gigantic ice statues. All of the giant rhinoceroses were instantly slain on the spot, and even their souls hadn't managed to escape. Within a set of secret chambers inside the bodies of these giant stone puppets, a group of deity transformation stage human cultivators all released the items in their hands, as relieved expressions appeared on their faces. These items were a series of shimmering red talismans, upon which were inscribed countless golden and silver runes. As soon as these talismans were released by the human cultivators, they immediately completely dimmed and disintegrated into plumes of smoke. Almost at the exact same moment, the human warriors on the city wall had exhausted the powers of their weapons, and they quickly began to retreat back to the city. They were replaced by groups of human cultivators wearing four-colored robes, and as soon as they arrived on the city wall, they summoned a series of shimmering treasures, which transformed into swathes of five-colored light that hurtled directly toward the oncoming army of low-grade devilish beasts. All of the low-grade devilish beasts that came into contact with these swathes of light were instantly destroyed, and it was quite clear that these weapons were far more powerful than the weapons the human warriors had been using. With so many cultivators attacking at once, they were able to conjure up an astonishing spectacle, even though there weren't many high-grade beings among their ranks. Without the protection of the giant rhinoceroses, the low-grade devilish beasts were being wiped out at an alarming rate, and the devilish army was being severely dented. As a result, the all-encompassing devilish cavaliers behind the low-grade devilish beasts immediately spurred on the devilish cloud around them to more than double the speed of its advancement. Following a command issued by a high-grade cultivator, who was the leader of all of the human cultivators on the city wall, everyone immediately directed their treasures away from the low-grade devilish beasts and aimed them toward the devilish cloud instead. The treasures hurtled toward the devilish cloud like a series of shooting stars, and a few dull thumps rang out as the devilish cloud churned violently. A series of massive black runes then surged out of the cloud in a frenzy before forming a giant black formation. Treasures rained down upon the formation like a torrential storm, but the formation merely tremored slightly before keeping all of the treasures at bay. Right at this moment, the devilish cavaliers within the devilish cloud each raised a hand at the same time, conjuring up long blades that were several feet in length each before slashing them violently through the air. Countless black blade projections swept out of the devilish cloud as streaks of black light, and resounding explosions echoed throughout the entire heavens. Hundreds of thousands of human treasures clashed with these blade projections before instantly being sliced into pieces, then disintegrated into specks of light of different colors. The entire sky was instantly illuminated by these colorful lights, and at the same time, the devilish cavaliers let loose loud roars as they hurled their long blades through the air. The blades transformed into streaks of black light that vanished into the giant formation up above, and a series of giant black blades quickly re-emerged from the center of the formation, amid erratic flashes of black light. Each of the blades was several hundred feet in length, and they immediately swept forward before crashing viciously down toward the city wall up ahead. Black light swirled around the giant blades, and blade projections that were over 10,000 feet in length hurtled directly toward the city wall, unleashing a devastatingly fearsome aura. All of the human cultivators encompassed beneath this burst of terrifying spiritual pressure immediately flew into a blind panic, and many of them rose up into the air to flee the scene, but it was already too late. The giant black blade projections swept through the air, reducing all of the human cultivators to shreds of mangled blood and flesh, and another massive section of the city wall was felled, creating a huge gap that was over 1,000 feet wide. Over 10,000 cultivators had just been killed by that single attack alone, and all of the human cultivators on the city wall were extremely horrified to see this. Some of them gritted their teeth and continued to attack the devilish formation in the distance, while others hurriedly summoned defensive treasures as a prophylactic measure. After unleashing that devastating barrage of attacks, the giant black blades at the center of the formation disintegrated into specks of black light, following which a bone-chilling cry rang out from that gargantuan devilish arc again. Vicious looks appeared on the faces of all of the devilish cavaliers upon hearing this sound, and they roared as they abruptly spurred on their devilish steeds to carry them forward as rapid streaks of black light. The distance of several kilometers was covered by these devilish cavaliers in just a few flashes, and all of the attacks that they were struck by were repelled by the black light barriers that appeared over their suits of armor. Only very few of the oncoming treasures managed to break through their defenses, but the number of devilish cavaliers that were felled by these treasures was simply negligible in the grand scheme of things. In the blink of an eye, 100,000 all-encompassing devilish cavaliers had reached the protective light barrier in front of the city wall, and they unleashed countless streaks of powerful black light with their weapons to attack the light barrier. Meanwhile, their devilish steeds were also unleashing all types of abilities, with some blasting pillars of flames out of their mouths, while others conjured up a series of giant wind blades, and some were even directly attacking the light barrier with their horns. In the face of such an astonishing number of attacks, the protective light barrier was only able to last for the span of a few breaths before flashing erratically, looking as if it were on the verge of collapse. Just a single wave of attacks from these all-encompassing devilish cavaliers was threatening to breach the city's defenses, and the oncoming human treasures were completely ineffective against them. As for the giant stone puppets in the city, they seemed to only be capable of unleashing that one attack, and they had reverted back to become giant buildings again thereafter. However, a clear ringing sound suddenly erupted from one of the giant towers, immediately following which spatial fluctuations surged through the air nearby, and thousands of human cultivators suddenly emerged. All of them wore grim expressions, and they quickly formed a massive formation with the giant tower at the very center. After that, they lowered their heads and raised a hand each as they began to chant incantations in unison. 5 colored incantation seals formed by spiritual power surged into the massive tower as countless streaks of spiritual light, and a loud buzzing sound rang out from the tower as dazzling 5-colored light appeared over its surface. At the same time, violent tremors suddenly ran through a plot of empty land outside the city wall, and the ground abruptly split open to reveal a series of inky black tunnels. Immediately thereafter, groups of copper humanoid figures that were each around 20 feet tall rushed out of the tunnels. These copper humanoid figures were clad in thick and heavy suits of armor, and were wielding all types of weapons, including long halberds and powerful crossbows. Some of them were riding atop copper spirit beast steeds, while others were standing on azure war carriages that were over 100 feet in length each. These humanoid figures pounced toward the devilish cavaliers in a completely expressionless manner, and the devilish general in the giant arc seemed to be rather taken aback to see this, but he then harumphed coldly before letting loose another piercing cry. Ferocious looks immediately appeared in the eyes of the devilish cavaliers as they rushed toward the puppet army, and a fierce battle immediately ensued. During this brief period of respite, a series of dazzling streaks of light appeared in the air above the city wall. These streaks of light then faded to reveal several thousand high-grade human cultivators, and they summoned countless treasures before also joining the battle. Even though the army of copper puppets was clearly no match for the all-encompassing devilish cavaliers, the addition of the high-grade cultivators allowed them to hold their own. Furthermore, with the assistance from the desperate attacks being unleashed by the low-grade cultivators on the city wall, they were slowly gaining the upper hand. Strangely enough, the devilish general in the giant arc didn't send the Jialun war devils into battle despite this. Only after several hours had passed, when both the all-encompassing devilish cavaliers and the human army had suffered some casualties, did the dull chime of a bell suddenly ring out. As soon as the devilish cavaliers heard this sound, they immediately began to retreat, forming a series of tight defensive formations as they did. At the same time, the Jialun war devils began to advance while appraising the human army with cold expressions. The high-grade human cultivators' hearts jolted upon seeing this, and they didn't dare to pursue the retreating devilish cavaliers. The copper puppet army also stopped not far away from Heavenly and City, the behest of some mysterious cultivators in the city. After these devilish cavaliers retreated back to the giant arcs, they immediately disappeared into the arcs as specks of black light. Once all of the devilish cavaliers had entered the arcs, the Jylun war devils also turned back and did the same thing. A loud buzzing sound rang out, and all of the giant black arcs instantly flew away into the distance, vanishing out of sight in what seemed like the blink of an eye. After launching a massive attack against the city, the devilish army had retreated in an inexplicable fashion. Han Li and Fairy Silver Light couldn't help but exchange a befuddled glance upon seeing this. Han Li was silent for a moment before analyzing in a contemplative manner. Something's not right. If those Jylun war devils had joined the battle, the devilish army could have immediately regained the upper hand, and if the devilish lords had been deployed as well, then it's quite possible that they could have forced their way into the city. With so many devilish elites in this army, I'm sure there would be quite a few devilish lords among their ranks as well. 2 of Heavenly and City's grand elders have already perished, which means there are only 2 body integration cultivators left in the city, so they're at a grave disadvantage when it comes to top-grade forces. Heavenly and City must have some other trump card that the devilish army has already fallen prey to, which is why they're proceeding with such caution. That does indeed sound quite plausible. It seems that our task here may not be as difficult as we imagined. Fairy Silver Light's expression eased slightly upon hearing this. I wouldn't be so quick to jump to conclusions. Even if Heavenly and City does possess some kind of powerful trump card, it's most likely not enough to oppose the devilish army. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken such a risk to request reinforcements from Deep Heaven City. We'll only know what the exact situation is like when we enter the city, Han Li said. Fairy Silver Light nodded in response. I guess so. Even though the devilish army has retreated, they've definitely left behind some scouts to monitor the situation here, but there's no way they can stop us, so let's head to the city right away. Fairy Lin Luan of the Heavenly Sovereign Sect is an old acquaintance of mine. I wonder how she's doing. Indeed, this is a great opportunity for us to enter the city. Let's go, Han Li agreed with a nod. At this point, the human cultivators and puppet army had also retreated back to the city, and the 2 of them began to fly toward the city as 2 streaks of light. Their approach naturally attracted the attention of the high-grade human cultivators in the distance, and some of the spatial tempering cultivators among them swept their spiritual sense toward Han Li's duo from afar. Upon verifying that the 2 were both humans, a stir immediately ran through the group of human cultivators. Just as they were about to reach Heavenly and City, a bone-chilling voice suddenly rang out, seemingly out of nowhere. I've been waiting for you. As soon as the voice trailed off, the nearby world's origin chi surged violently, and a set of mountainous devilish claws emerged out of thin air before hurtling toward the 2 streaks of light. The devilish claws were several thousand feet in size and completely inky black in color, with pillars of green flames erupting from the fingertips. Its enormous size encompassed the entire heavens, and Han Li's duo was struck by the sense that there was no way to evade it. One of the devilish lords must have stayed behind, Fairy Silver Light exclaimed as she immediately swept both of her sleeves through the air. Letter 1D557, letter 1D42B, letter 1D68T, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D604, letter 1D41E, letter 1D41C, letter 1D698, letter 1D696. Silver light flashed, and a pair of silver hooks shot forth before transforming into a white crescent moon and a scorching crimson sun. Each celestial body was several hundred feet in size, and they hurtled directly toward the giant claws amid the sound of rumbling thunderclaps and howling winds. As for Han Li, he also raised a hand to launch a massive shimmering golden fist projection through the air, and an earth-shattering boom rang out as spiritual light of different colors exploded violently. The entire space tremored, and the sound of wind and thunder rang out incessantly. Even with Han Li's extraordinary strength and physical constitution, he was still forced to stumble back 7 to 8 steps from the force of the impact before finally stabilizing himself. As for Fairy Silver Light, she was forced back even further, hurtling through the air for several hundred feet before finally managing to arrest her own momentum. Furthermore, this was even after Han Li had nullified around 75% of the devilish claw's power. In the face of such a fearsome attack, Fairy Silver Light's expression immediately darkened significantly. However, the owner of the devilish claws hadn't enjoyed that clash either. Not only had the giant devilish claw projection he unleashed been completely destroyed, he was also forced to stumble out of thin air. A cold look appeared in Han Li's eyes, and he was just about to focus his gaze on this devilish being when a bone-chilling sensation suddenly swept toward him from behind without any warning. If a normal mid-body integration cultivator were in his place, they would have definitely been slowed down significantly by this burst of glacial power. However, Han Li possessed the five-colored glacial flames, and he had also absorbed another type of unknown glacial power in the primordial world, so his proficiency in controlling glacial powers wasn't inferior in the slightest compared to body integration cultivators who purely used ice attribute cultivation arts. As such, the burst of glacial power didn't do anything aside from conjure up a layer of frost over his robes. All of a sudden, a green figure leaped out of Han Li's back before throwing a vicious punch. The green fist struck a snowy white flying dagger amid a resounding boom, and green and white light intertwined as a burst of thriving vitality erupted in all directions alongside white glacial chi. The flying dagger tremored before flying back, then landed in the grasp of another humanoid figure who had just emerged out of thin air. This was a thin young man who appeared to be around 15 to 16 years of age. He wore a cold expression and was currently appraising Han Li with a frosty look in his eyes. As for the green figure, it was revealed to be a green-robed humanoid figure that was identical in appearance to Han Li. There was faint purple light emanating from its body, and it was missing one of its hands. Even though it had managed to force back that flying dagger with its fist, its hand has also been severed during the clash. However, a ball of green light then appeared around the wrist of the severed hand, and another hand immediately took its place. The green-skinned Han Li flexed the fingers on the hand, and it was no different to the hand that had just been severed. The frosty young man faltered slightly upon seeing this before a vicious light appeared in his eyes. The green-skinned Han Li was naturally none other than his body integration stage spirit body, and it had saved him from that perilous sneak attack. However, Han Li wore a slightly dark expression, as he also appraised the white-robed young man with animosity in his eyes. Ever since he had mastered the first stage of the spirit refinement technique, no one had ever been able to sneak so close to him without his detection. This immediately made Han Li quite wary of this mid-body integration stage devilish lord. All of a sudden, a resounding boom rang out, and Han Li raised an eyebrow as he cast his gaze toward fairy silver light out of the corner of his eyes. There he discovered that she had summoned a silver flag, which had transformed into a ball of silver light, and had just endured another clash against the owner of the giant devilish claws. Judging from her pale complexion and the slightly disoriented look in her eyes, she had clearly come off decidedly second best during the clash. This was partially due to the fact that she had still yet to recover from her last battle, but at the same time, the power of her opponent was certainly not to be discounted. Han Li's heart stirred slightly as he cast his gaze up into the air, upon which he caught sight of a burly devilish man in a suit of black devilish armor. The devilish man had a crimson sarcoma on his head, and he was holding a pair of inky black bone hammers while appraising Han Li and fairy silver light with a sinister expression. Han Li's eyelids twitched slightly as he discovered that this black-armored devilish man was at the pinnacle of the late-body integration stage, and the indescribably sinister aura emanating from his body indicated that he seemed to be using an extremely powerful devilish cultivation art. You two are esteemed figures even in the context of the entire Elder Devil race. Don't you think it's far too underhanded to use such sneaky tactics? Fairy Silver Light accused in an enraged manner. HMPH, if we can kill our enemies, what does it matter? We aren't bound by the pretentious rules that you humans have set for yourselves. The burly devilish lord guffawed as he thumped his hammers together violently. Judging from your powers, I'm sure you two are quite renowned even among devilish lords. How about telling us your names? Han Li said in a calm manner. You two were able to withstand my attack just now, so you're worthy of hearing my name. I'm Tai Long of our sacred race's Steel Bone branch, and this is Fei Ye of the Ice Spirit branch. You two must be the human reinforcements that have been sent to this heavenly city. Why don't you tell me your name as well so I can add you to the list of human body integration cultivators I've slain? Tai Long said with a sinister smile. Rather than being irked by this provocative remark, Han Li merely smiled and replied, My surname is Han, and I'm just an insignificant man that I'm sure you wouldn't have heard of. Do you think you still have a chance to kill us after failing to do so with that sneak attack? As if to back up Han Li's words, as soon as his voice trailed off, two streaks of spiritual light suddenly flew out of heavenly city, before hurtling directly toward them. Within the two streaks of light, two astonishing bursts of body integration stage spiritual pressure surged toward the two devilish lords. They contained an early body integration cultivator and a mid-body integration cultivator. Tai Long's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and after taking a quick glance at the two oncoming streaks of light, he turned to his companion with a dark expression and said, "Let's go." As soon as his voice trailed off, he raised a hand to summon an inky black war carriage that was several tens of feet in length, and he immediately flew onto the carriage. Meanwhile, the frosty young man remained completely expressionless, but his body blurred on the spot before vanishing in a flash. In the next instant, the white-robed young man appeared several thousand feet away, then took another step and vanished once again. He seemed to possess a formless body, and it only took him several steps to completely disappear into the distance. As for Tai Long, the black war carriage beneath his feet flashed with black light, then carried him away into the distance as an arc of black lightning. A string of thunderclaps rang out, and after a few more flashes, the carriage also vanished into the distance. Han Li wore a contemplative expression as he looked on at the two departing devilish lords, but made no effort to give chase. As for Fairy Silver Light, she was clearly very wary of Tai Long's astonishing powers, and also remained on the spot with a strained expression. These two devilish lords were far more powerful than she had anticipated, and there could even be other devilish lords among this army. In that case, even with her and Han Li's assistance, it would be very difficult to guard this city. Han Li's expression quickly returned to normal, and a faint smile appeared on his face as he cast his gaze toward the two oncoming streaks of light. The lights faded, and two people were revealed not far away from Han Li's duo. The two people consisted of a man who appeared to be in his 40s and a woman who appeared to be around 27 to 28 years of age. The man had a square and stern face and wore a set of yellow scholar robes. He had a thick white jade book in his hand, and there were two giant brushes, one golden and one silver, strapped to his back. As for the woman, she had an oval face and was quite a beauty. She wore a dark green palatial dress, and she was holding a basket of flowers. A hint of elation flashed through Fairy Silver Light's eyes at the sight of the woman, and she immediately said, "I'm so glad that you're safe and well, Sister Lin. I was sent here to reinforce your sect." "Sister Silver Light, it's so good to see you. Your city must have received our request for reinforcements. May I ask who your companion is? I don't recall ever seeing him before." The woman in the palatial dress appraised Fairy Silver Light with a look of surprise and elation on her face, which was then replaced by a hint of befuddlement when she turned to Han Li. Before Han Li had a chance to reply, the yellow-robed scholar smiled and said, "He, this is fellow Taoist Han Li. I met him on several occasions on 9 Immortal Mountain." This scholar seemed to recognize Han Li, and Han Li also found him to be rather familiar. After a brief pause for contemplation, he recalled who this man was, and he immediately greeted with a smile, "Ah, your Master Azure Dragon of the 9-Star Sect. It's a pleasure meeting you again." This Master Azure Dragon was a body integration cultivator whom he'd met on several occasions during the Myriad Treasure Exchange Convention, but they weren't overly familiar with one another. The scholar swept his spiritual sense toward Han Li, upon which a hint of astonishment appeared in his eyes. "I recall you were only at the early body integration stage when we last met, yet you've progressed to the mid-body integration stage after just several centuries. I really must congratulate you, Brother Han. I was very fortunate to have been able to make a breakthrough during the past few centuries. I didn't think that we would meet again after the exchange convention. This must be the fellow Taoist Lin Luan that Fairy Silver Light mentioned, right?" Han Li gave a modest response as usual before changing the subject and directing his attention to the woman in the palatial dress. "Indeed, I am Lin Luan, Brother Han. I've heard much about you lately, and I must thank you and Sister Silver Light for coming to our city to assist us in our time of need. If no body integration stage fellow Taoists had come to reinforce us, then our heavenly city most likely wouldn't even be able to last 2 more months," Lin Luan said in a grateful voice that was very pleasant to the ears. "Why is that, Sister Lin? Brother Han and I saw the devilish army attack the city from afar just now, and the all-encompassing devilish cavaliers do appear to be quite troublesome, but the city was able to keep them at bay, so what's the issue?" Fairy Silver Light asked as a grim look appeared on her face. "Unfortunately, what you just saw is only a small portion of the devilish army. The true army is situated in a mountain range thousands of kilometers away from here. Also, these devilish elites aren't attacking our city in an all-out assault because they're waiting for a certain day to arrive, Lin Luan replied with a wry smile. They're waiting for a certain day. Fairy Silver Light was rather bewildered to hear this. Indeed, but this is not the place to talk. Let's return to the city first. The Elder Devils are extremely cunning. Perhaps those two devilish lords will return to this place with the other two devilish lords, Master Azure Dragon reminded. Fairy Silver Light's heart jolted upon hearing this, and she immediately agreed without any hesitation. There are 4 devilish lords in total. All right, let's hurry back to the city. Thus, the 4 of them flew toward Heavenly and City together, reaching the massive city wall in the blink of an eye. At this point, some of the human cultivators and copper puppets were still yet to enter the city, and Han Li couldn't help but take a few glances at them. The high-grade cultivators all appeared to be quite exhausted, and some of them had very pale complexions, indicating that they were either carrying injuries or had expended far too much energy. As for the copper puppets, most of them were riddled with pits and bumps, and some of them were even missing limbs. It seemed that Heavenly and City really had been struggling. Fairy Silver Light's expression also darkened upon seeing this, while Lin Luan and Master Azure Dragon could only look on with wry smiles. Right at this moment, a group of cultivators in 5-colored robes flew onto the city wall atop flying treasures. They then began to repair the city wall while carving a series of complex and profound formations onto its surface. At the same time, groups of human warriors got onto the city wall to replace the human cultivators there. These warriors were all fully equipped and appeared to be quite well rested, and Han Li's heart eased slightly upon seeing this. Thus, he and Fairy Silver Light were led over the city wall, as well as the defenses that had been set up in the city, and finally made their way into a hall situated in a corner of Heavenly and City. There were several spatial tempering cultivators already waiting for them inside the hall, and as soon as they arrived, the group of cultivators stood up to greet them in an enthusiastic manner. At the sight of the hint of befuddlement that had appeared on Han Li and Fairy Silver Light's faces, Master Azure Dragon hurriedly explained, "These are the fellow Taoists who are responsible for overseeing our city's defenses. I'm sure they'll be able to introduce our current situation to you." "I see." Han Li nodded before taking a seat in the hall, while the group of spatial tempering cultivators remained standing respectfully off to the side. "Sister Lin, fellow Taoist Azure Dragon, please tell us about Heavenly and City's current situation in detail, as well as how those 2 fellow Taoists were killed, so Brother Han and I can know what to look out for," Fairy Silver Light said as she took a seat. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D563, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D556, letter 1D568, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D698, letter 1D46. Everyone's expressions changed slightly at the mention of the 2 deceased body integration cultivators, and Master Azure Dragon's expression became a little strained. Fairy Lin Luan's brows furrowed slightly as she replied, "There really isn't much to be said about how those fellow Taoists were killed. We mentioned everything there was to be said in that letter. The devilish lords that are leading the attack against our city are extremely cunning. They only brought a small portion of their all-encompassing devilish cavaliers initially, and these cavaliers were led by only 2 early body integration stage devilish lords. As such, our 2 fellow Taoists were lured out of the city, where they were ambushed by 4 devilish lords and were killed on the scene." "I see, these devilish beings really are very calculating," Fairy Silver Light sighed in a forlorn manner. Han Li nodded in agreement before asking, "Indeed, the 2 of us will need to proceed with caution as well. If possible, would you be able to tell us about the abilities of those 4 devilish lords? Of course, we'll be counting on you and fellow Taoist Silver Light to help us defend the city, so we'll give you all of the information we've compiled on these 4 devilish lords," Master Azure Dragon quickly agreed. "That would be best. You were saying earlier that the devilish beings were waiting for a certain day. Would you be able to elaborate on that?" Han Li asked. Fairy Silver Light was clearly also very interested to hear the answer. "This is referring to the day where the 5 suns transition into moons 2 months from now. On that day, the main protective formation that our city is relying on will cease to function," Lin Luan replied in a grim manner. "The day when the 5 suns transition into moons. Now that you mention it, this centenary phenomenon is indeed going to take place in 2 months, but how does it have anything to do with the city's protective formation?" Fairy Silver Light asked. Han Li was very knowledgeable in formations, and he quickly theorized. "On the day when the 5 suns transition into moons, the yang energy of heaven and earth will be severely lacking, Could it be that this formation draws its power from this energy? Precisely, fellow Taoist Han. Our four sects set up a nine-sun astral formation in the city, and the more yang energy of heaven and earth it can absorb, the more powerful it'll be. At the height of its powers, it wouldn't be impossible for it to kill even devilish lords. It's exactly because of this formation that the devilish army hasn't dared to launch an all-out attack against our city. Not only can this formation only be set up in a place where 9 plots of earthly fire can be found, the materials required have exhausted almost the entire wealth of our four sects. On top of that, it's limited by the fact that it can only unleash its power after absorbing an enormous amount of the yang energy of heaven and earth. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't be an issue, but due to the issue outlined earlier, we're truly in a dire situation, Lin Luan said with tightly furrowed brows. Nine-sun astral formation. If this formation is as powerful as you say, then why have I never heard of it before? Fairy Silver Light asked. That's no surprise. This formation is one that was created by a dozen or so of our four sects formation masters, and it took over 1,000 years for them to do so. Its powers are definitely not inferior to those of the legendary ancient formations, Fairy Lin Luan explained in a slightly proud manner. Han Li's expression remained unchanged upon hearing this, but he was actually quite surprised. Only a major power such as this one would be able to gather enough resources and manpower to create a new formation of such staggering power. It seemed that the four sects were very powerful and had been preparing for this devilish tribulation for a long time. Not only had they gathered 4 body integration cultivators, they had even created such an extraordinary formation. A thought suddenly occurred to Han Li, and he smiled as he said, "This 9-sun astral formation does sound very powerful, but the city is facing an army of devilish elites led by 4 devilish lords. Surely this formation alone isn't enough to make the army so wary of the city." Indeed, this formation is extremely powerful, but it will surely take quite a while to activate, so it would be quite a stretch to use it against the 4 devilish lords. On top of that, there's a devilish lord at the pinnacle of the late body integration stage among the devilish army. Will a formation really be enough to oppose such a powerful being? Fairy Silver Light also asked with a puzzled expression. Aside from the 9-sun astral formation, our city did have some powerful trump cards that could threaten devilish lords, but these trump cards all have severe limitations and can only be used a set number of times, so there are barely any remaining now. These devilish lords are throwing their armies at us once every few days, and they're doing this in order to exhaust all of our trump cards. I'll disclose the specific details of the situation to the two of you later, Master Azure Dragon replied with a wry smile. Indeed, those devilish lords are extremely devious, and every time they've attacked the city, we've been forced to exhaust a large number of our defensive resources. On many occasions, the two of us were forced to exit the city to combat the enemies, and the devilish lords would always appear to attack us. If we hadn't used some trump cards to defend ourselves, we could have easily followed in the footsteps for our 2 fallen fellow Taoists, Fairy Lin Luan said, as a look of intense resentment appeared on her face. Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D4, 1E, letter 1D556, letter 1D604, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D68C, letter 1D560, letter 1D55E. It sounds like the city is not in a very good place. Please elaborate on the current situation, Han Li said in a calm voice. Yes, it would indeed be a good idea for us to get a better grasp of the situation, Fairy Silver Light chimed in agreement. Fellow Taoist Shi, introduce our heavenly and city's current situation to our fellow Taoists here, Master Azure Dragon said as he turned to one of the spatial tempering cultivators. Yes, Grand Elder, a gray-robed elderly man said as he immediately took a step forward in a respectful manner. After extending a salute to Han Li's duo, he began in a solemn voice. The situation that our heavenly and city is currently in is truly not a very optimistic one. All of the fortresses we had constructed around the city had been razed to the ground by the devilish army several months ago, and 5 of the 13 protective restrictions we've set up around the city have also been destroyed. In order to repair these restrictions, we'll require at least a month of respite. The most powerful asset of our city, the army of copper puppets, has also been reduced from 100,000 to around only 70,000. On top of that, the remaining puppets are all severely damaged and are in desperate need of repair and recuperation. Otherwise, their numbers will only drop at an increased rate. The most damning thing of all is that the treasure used as the core of several of our city's major protective formations was destroyed in a surprise attack from the Jialun War Devils, which has dropped our defensive prowess by about 30%. As for the spirit beasts being nurtured by the heavenly insect and heavenly sovereign sect. As the elderly man spoke, the grim look in Fairy Silverlight's eyes became more and more pronounced. Han Li's brows also furrowed slightly, and after listening for a while longer, he suddenly interjected, "Why is it all bad news? Isn't there anything good you can tell us?" Of course there's some good news as well. Thus far, our city hasn't actually suffered all that many casualties, and we've only lost around 10% of all of our low and mid-grade cultivators and mortal warriors. It's just that morale is not very high due to frequent battles we've had to endure and the death of the 2 body integration stage seniors. On top of that, our supply of spirit stones and other resources are extremely abundant, and they'll be able to last us several decades with no issues. Thus, the gray-robed elderly man began to rattle off a list of positives at Han Li's behest. "I see, so we're not lacking in manpower or resources. With Brother Han and I here to reinforce the city, there's a very good chance that we'll be able to defend it," Fairy Silverlight said in a slightly relieved manner. "That's what fellow Taoist Azure Dragon and I think as well. With your assistance, we won't have to fear the 4 devilish lords anymore. Those all-encompassing devilish cavaliers and Jaialun war devils are certainly very troublesome, but as long as we can put on a display to show everyone that our high-end powers aren't inferior to that of the devilish army, then I'm sure morale will be recovered in no time," Lin Luan said with a hopeful look in her eyes. "Indeed, when the devilish army attacks our city again, we just have to think of a way to trap the 4 devilish lords, then unleash the power of the 9-sun astral formation. Perhaps we'll be able to severely wound 1 or 2 devilish lords," Master Azure Dragon chimed in an optimistic manner. "It most likely won't be that easy. Those 2 devilish lords have already seen us enter Heavenly and City, so they'll definitely have their guard up. They'll most likely devise countermeasures against the 9-sun astral formation, or simply wait until the day when the 5 suns transition into moons before they attack the city again," Han Li said with a shake of his head. If they choose to do that, then our city will get some much-needed respite. If we can repair the city's restrictions and copper puppet army and prepare some other trump cards we have up our sleeves, we may be able to defend the city even if the 9-sun astral formation fails. However, no matter what happens, we'll require your assistance, fellow Taoists," Master Azure Dragon said with a cold smile. After a brief silence, Han Li nodded and said, "It looks like that's all we can do for now. Rest assured, if those devilish lords join in on the attack against the city, fellow Taoist Silverlight, and I will be sure to lend you our assistance. We came all the way here with the goal of helping your city through these tough times, so we're certainly not going to just stand by and watch when our services are required," Fairy Silverlight chimed in with a smile. "You have my thanks, fellow Taoists," Fairy Lin Luan immediately said in a grateful manner, and Master Azure Dragon also expressed his gratitude with an elated look in his eyes. After that, Han Li and Fairy Silverlight made some more inquiries about the city defenses, and after the spatial tempering cultivators answered all of their questions, they took their leave and were taken to their silent cultivation chambers to rest. They had traveled for a long time to get to Heavenly and City, and a battle against the devilish army could erupt at any moment, so they really did need to rest and recuperate. Of course, prior to their departure, Master Azure Dragon gave each of them a jade slip containing information about the devilish army that they were facing. As such, as they were resting, they would be able to familiarize themselves with their enemies. Following the departure of Han Li's duo, the group of spatial tempering cultivators also took their leave. Master Azure Dragon looked on at their departing figures and suddenly heaved a long sigh. "Are you still concerned, fellow Taoist?" Fairy Lin Luan asked with a faint smile. "How could I not be concerned? You and I both saw how our fellow Taoists were felled on that day. Those 2 devilish lords are far more fearsome than we imagined. Even with fellow Taoist Han and fellow Taoist Silverlight's assistance, our chances of securing victory are still very slim," Master Azure Dragon said in a grim voice. Fairy Lin Luan's expression darkened slightly upon hearing this, but a cold smile then appeared on her face, and she said, "But if we use that thing, there's still a chance for us, so it's not like we've deceived them." "Are you really planning to release that thing? Even with the combined powers of all 4 of us, we were only able to seal it into the 9-sun astral formation when it was at its most feeble point. If we were to release that monster, perhaps it would attack us first before it attacks our enemies. After all, it does possess some intelligence," Master Azure Dragon said in a concerned manner. There's no need to be overly concerned about that. The blood-soul talisman is almost ready, and it's in the final stage of its preparation. I've inquired the restriction masters in our sect about this, and even though the talisman isn't completely ready, it'll currently still be around half as effective as it should be in its complete form. As long as we inject that talisman into the monster, even if we won't be able to completely control it, we'll at least be able to ensure that it won't attack us. Our top priority now is to endure this period of 2 months. Sealing that beast in the 9-sun astral formation is indeed a very secure arrangement, but if the formation doesn't deactivate on its own, there's no way for us to release that beast either. You and I both know that if the devilish lords didn't care about casualties and launched an all-out attack on our city, even with the 9-sun astral formation, there's no way we can stop them, Fairy Lin Luan said in a grim voice. The blood-soul talisman is ready. That's fantastic. With fellow Taoist Han and Fairy Silver Light's assistance, we should be able to last until that day. I'm sure those devilish beings won't have anticipated that we're also waiting for the day when the 5 suns transition into moons to arrive, Master Azure Dragon said in an elated manner. With that monster's help, even in the worst-case scenario, we'll at least be evenly matched with those devilish beings. If worse comes to worst, then we'll just have to take our core disciples and travel to Deep Heaven City. We'll have to rely on their charity for our safety, but at the very least, it'll ensure that we'll survive this devilish tribulation. During the few days prior to the day when the 5 suns transition into moons, gather all of the city's resources and core disciples. We can leave right away if required. As long as we do our best to hold off those devilish lords, those disciples will definitely be able to make a safe departure, Fairy Lin Luan said with a confident smile, and it was quite clear that she had put a lot of thought into this plan. After contemplating the proposed plan for a moment, Master Azure Dragon decided that it was quite sound, but a forlorn look then appeared on his face. I guess that's our only option. What a pity. If our 2 fellow Taoists hadn't fallen into that trap, our heavenly city would be in a far better situation right now. Indeed, who would have thought that the devilish lords would become so cunning? If we had anticipated their plan and unleashed the combination formation that the 4 of us prepared in advance, we definitely would have been at least evenly matched with those devilish lords, Fairy Lin Luan sighed. Alright, so we've now decided on our main course of action, but I'll have to trouble you to keep an eye on things as our overall morale is still very shaky in the aftermath of the loss of our 2 grand elders. Also, make sure that no resources are spared in repairing those copper puppets. It took our 4 sects tens of thousands of years to refine them, and they're our main counter against the all-encompassing devilish cavaliers. Of course, but I think it's time we considered unleashing our elite forces against those Jialun war devils. Otherwise, the puppets alone definitely wouldn't be enough. Thus, the 2 began to discuss some other matters. Fair Lin Luan possessed a slightly inferior cultivation base compared to Master Azure Dragon, but she was clearly the leader when it came to decision-making. Just as the 2 of them were holding their discussion, the 4 devilish lords were also discussing some matters together. They were situated in a hall within a massive valley that was enshrouded in dense devilish chi tens of thousands of kilometers away from Heavenly City. Tai Long was sitting on the main seat, while Fei Ye was leaning expressionlessly against a stone pillar beside the entrance of the hall. The other 2 devilish lords were comprised of a smiling beauty in a blue dress and a 40-feet-tall giant clad in a suit of fiery red armor. Only his eyes were visible through the suit of full-body armor, and there were flames dancing within them. What? Lord Li's trio was killed at the same time, and we've been ordered to stop attacking Heavenly City to investigate this matter, the giant in the suit of red armor exclaimed in an incredulous manner. Even though he had tried to keep his voice as low as possible, the entire hall still tremored violently. Is that true, Brother Tai? You're not making a joke here, are you? The female devilish lord asked in a bewildered manner. I only just received this order following my return as well. This order was passed down by Master Zhu Guang himself, so it's definitely authentic. On top of that, Master Zhu Guang even deployed his personal guards, the Yin-Yang twin devils, to meet up with us in a month. It seems that not only was Lord Li's trio killed, something that was extremely important to Master Zhu Guang was also lost in the process, Tai Long said in a grim voice. Even the Yin-Yang twin devils were sent out. That item really must be extremely important to Master Zhu Guang then. Brother Tai, do you know exactly what was lost to prompt such a reaction from Master Zhu Guang? The woman asked. I'm not so sure about that, and Master Zhu Guang didn't elaborate on it either. However, we should be able to ask the Yin-Yang twin devils when they arrive, Tai Long said with a shake of his head. If it's something that Master Zhu Guang doesn't want to tell us, then I'll only be asking for trouble if I try to pry around for answers. It's a pity that we'll have to give up on our attack against Heavenly City, though, the woman sighed. Not only was this woman an early body integration stage devilish lord, she seemed to be regarding the late body integration stage Tai Long as equals. We're not giving up. It's only a temporary ceasefire. Once the day when the 5 suns transition into moons arrives, we'll launch an all-out attack. 2 body integration stage human cultivators just arrived at Heavenly City, and they're quite powerful, so there's no longer any point in launching these attacks to whittle down the city's defenses. On top of that, seeing as the yin-yang twin devils are coming here, perhaps we can invite them to assist us during our all-out attack. Even if the humans do come up with some tricks, there'll be no match for all 6 of us, Tai Long said in a calm manner. That's true. If the yin-yang twin devils can also participate in the attack, then we'll be able to take the city down with ease. Speaking of which, from the sounds of it, you seem to have already encountered the 2 new human cultivators. Would you be able to tell us about their abilities? The woman asked. Tai Long's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this before he replied, I'm not the only one who encountered those 2. Brother Fei was also with me. You were also there, Brother Fei. What did you think of those human cultivators? The red-armored giant asked. Fei didn't seem to be a fan of speaking, and only after a long pause did he give a clipped response. There's a weak early body integration cultivator and a powerful mid-body integration cultivator. The woman faltered slightly before chuckling. That's not a very helpful answer, Brother Fei. Besides, you're a direct lineal descendant of sacred ancestor Zhu Tian, so your powers far outstrip those of cultivators of the same caliber. Your standards of weak and powerful are much different from ours. One of them is weaker than you, while the other can kill you. Is that clear enough? Fei elaborated in an expressionless manner, and the woman's chuckles were immediately cut off as a dark expression appeared on her face. Is that an exaggeration, Brother Fei? Fairy Yu is one of the branch descendants of Master Ming Luo. Her bloodline may not be as pure as your direct lineal bloodline, but she's definitely far more powerful than other devilish lords of her cultivation base as well, the red-armored giant said in a skeptical manner. I'm just telling you what I think. You can choose to believe it or not, Fei replied in a cold voice. The red-armored giant didn't have any response to this. Brother Fei's words are a little harsh and abrasive, but one of those 2 new human cultivators is indeed quite extraordinary. At the very least, his physical body is no weaker than mine, and he possesses incredible strength. He was able to escape completely unscathed from a grab that I had unleashed. Keep in mind that he was caught completely off guard, and my grab was imbued with a hint of the power of laws. Under normal circumstances, it should have been able to capture a mid-body integration cultivator with ease, Tai Long said. Is he really that troublesome to deal with? The woman was truly surprised to hear this. Brother Fei is definitely not exaggerating. Even I was struck by a sense of extreme danger when facing that human cultivator, and I may not have been able to defeat him. Otherwise, Brother Fei and I wouldn't have immediately made a retreat after the initial confrontation. If you 2 encounter that human cultivator, then you really must be careful, Tai Long said in a solemn manner. Thank you for the words of caution, but if I really do encounter this human cultivator, I'd like to face him to see if he really is as powerful as the 2 of you proclaim, the woman said as a competitive gleam flashed through her eyes. Tai Long's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he was just about to say something when the red-armored giant suddenly proposed a theory that sent a jolt running through everyone's hearts. If that human cultivator is this powerful, then could it be that he was behind the deaths of Lord Li's trio? Tai Long and the woman's expression stiffened slightly upon hearing this, and they reflexively exchanged a glance. A hint of surprise also appeared on Fei's stoic face. Now that you mention it, that is indeed quite possible. Judging from the time when Lord Li's trio was killed, there's a good chance that they would have encountered the 2 human cultivators as they were traveling to Heavenly City. In that case, that human cultivator must be even more powerful than I imagine him to be. With the assistance of another devilish lord, it won't be difficult for me to defeat Lord Li's trio, but even I wouldn't be able to kill all of them if they were intent on fleeing the scene, Tai Long said in a contemplative voice. In that case, we really must regard this man as a formidable enemy. If he was able to kill Lord Li's trio, then it may be quite difficult for us to ensure his death even with the help of the yin-yang twin devils. If he's determined to escape, then only a sacred ancestor will be able to trap him with absolute reliability, the woman murmured as her brows furrowed tightly. Indeed, on top of that, now that this man has joined Heavenly City, he could prove to be a major volatile factor in our plans as well, Tai Long said with a dark expression. The entire hall fell silent, and the four devilish lords had become rather concerned. HMPH, if worse comes to worst, then we'll just have to use that strategy again. If we can lure him into our trap, there's no way he'll be able to escape. We managed to kill those two body integration stage human cultivators last time, didn't we? The woman suddenly suggested. We can't use that strategy again. The last time we did so, it was at the expense of close to 1,000 devilish cavaliers and over 10 war devils. If we use it a second time, the cost will definitely be far greater than last time. These are all elite forces that were painstakingly trained by our sacred race. We can't just sacrifice them like this, the red-armored giant countered vehemently. HMPH, but if we don't use that strategy and let that human cultivator escape, he might end up killing more of our brethren than what we'd have to sacrifice to trap him. On top of that, if he's the man that Master Zhu Guang is searching for, and we let him escape, which one of us is going to bear the wrath of Master Zhu Guang? Tai Long harumphed coldly in response. I was only speculating just now. How could there be such a coincidence that he's the one who killed Lord Li's trio? The red-armored giant backtracked with a wry smile. We'll have to launch an investigation to see if he's indeed the perpetrator. In any case, we have to treat this as a case of guilty until proven innocent. I would rather expend the necessary resources to kill him rather than wrongfully allow him to escape. However, I don't think we'll have to employ that strategy again to kill that man, Tai Long said. What do you mean by that, Brother Tai? First you say we'll only be able to kill that man through that strategy, and now you say we may not have to. Which is it? The woman asked as she raised her eyebrows in exasperation. Allow me to elaborate on my thought process, Fairy Yu. The yin-yang twin devils are indeed quite powerful, but even when combined, their powers are only roughly comparable to mine. Seeing as Master Zhu Guang has sent them to hunt down the perpetrator behind the deaths of Lord Li's trio, then he must have given them a way to kill that man. Otherwise, if that man is able to kill Lord Li's trio, then it won't be very difficult for him to kill the yin-yang twin devils as well, and I'm sure Master Zhu Guang is aware of this, Tai Long explained in a calm manner. That does indeed make sense. In that case, there really is no need for us to be overly concerned. We can just reserve that strategy as a last resort when all else fails. The red-armored giant was very relieved to hear this. However, the woman seemed to still be rather unconvinced. She turned to the white-robed young man and asked, "What do you think, Brother Fei? I don't care what measures you prepare to trap that man, but I have to be the one to take his life. He possesses a type of glacial power that will be extremely useful to me," Fei Ya said in a bone-chilling voice. The woman faltered slightly upon hearing this before chuckling. "Rest assured, I'll be sure to leave him to you. How about you, Brother Tai?" Tai Long hesitated momentarily before replying. "I'm naturally more than willing to let Brother Fei do the honors as well, but I'll be taking half of that man's treasures, while the half is split between Fairy Yu and Brother Yan. I presume you have no objections to that, Brother Fei." "All I want is that man's glacial power. You can do with his treasures as you please," Fei Ya replied in a nonchalant manner. "Brother Yan and I have no objections either," the woman agreed with a smile. Even though the woman was speaking on the red-armored man's behalf, the latter didn't seem to find this to be inappropriate at all. "All right, then it's decided. We'll send out some people to investigate the deaths of Lord Li's trio and wait for the arrival of the twin yin-yang devils in the meantime. I'm sure we'll be able to track down the perpetrator prior to the arrival of the day when the 5 suns transition into moons. If it really is that human cultivator, then we'll address the situation through the methods we just discussed. If it isn't him, then we'll act according to our original plan," Tai Long concluded. Within Heavenly City, Han Li was seated in a secret chamber on the first floor of an intricate pavilion. There were restrictions set up all around him, and he was inspecting a white wooden box with a contemplative look on his face. This wooden box was none other than the one he had obtained after killing that bald devilish lord. However, the item had been sealed with some kind of profound restriction that he had been unable to crack, and he finally had some time to study it now that he had arrived in Heavenly City. There were alternating bursts of frosty and scorching energy seeping out of the box, and it was able to keep out all spiritual sense, which made it all the more intriguing. After carefully inspecting the wooden box for a long while, two bursts of piercing blue light suddenly appeared in Han Li's eyes, and he peered directly into the depths of the box. As he did so, his expression began to change slightly, and he continued to stare at the wooden box in a completely still manner, as if he had transformed into a statue. Time slowly passed by, and 3 days and 3 nights flew by in the blink of an eye. At this point, Han Li's face had paled slightly, and the blue light in his eyes had also dimmed somewhat. Around 10 minutes later, Han Li made a hand seal with a peculiar look on his face, and the blue light in his eyes completely faded. Interesting. So this box is a Zumi treasure, and it's been sealed by 13 types of ancient restrictions. If I didn't possess my Brightsight Spirit Eyes ability, it would have been very difficult for me to study it. However, all of these restrictions are extremely powerful, and it would take at least several centuries for me to break each one. There's no way that bald devilish lord could have cast such profound restrictions. I wonder just what could be in this box, Han Li murmured to himself. He then laid the wooden box down onto the ground before him and began to stare at it in a contemplative manner. After a while, his eyes suddenly lit up, and a thought seemed to have occurred to him. I'm unable to break the restrictions cast on this box for now, but if I use that foreign secret technique, I should be able to inspect its contents. However, if there's a vicious creature or being contained within the box, then things could become a little troublesome. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he weighed up his options. However, he quickly arrived at a decision. So be it. Even in the worst-case scenario, I'll only be losing some of my spiritual sense, and half a month of meditation will allow me to make a full recovery, so it's definitely worth the risk. With that in mind, he immediately swept a sleeve through the air, and a dozen or so translucent five-colored beads flew out of his sleeve amid a flash of light. These beads then transformed into balls of spiritual light that hovered in midair, and within them were a series of five-colored eyes that were flashing with peculiar light. Han Li then flipped his hand over to produce another five-colored bead, which he held in front of his chest before immediately uttering a foreign incantation. Meanwhile, he laid his other hand onto the top of his own head, and a nude golden nascent soul emerged. It made a strange hand seal with its pair of tiny hands, and also began to chant an incantation. All of a sudden, bright light erupted from the five-colored eyes within the balls of spiritual light, and they released thin beams of five-colored light that vanished into the nascent soul in a flash. At the same time, the golden nascent soul let loose a low cry before abruptly pointing a finger toward the bead being held in front of Han Li's chest. A golden projection erupted from the nascent soul's body, then immediately vanished into the bead. A blurry nascent soul projection then took shape within the bead, and the golden nascent soul waved a hand toward the bead upon seeing this. Five-colored light swirled over the surface of the bead, and it quickly flew into the wooden box on the ground down below as a streak of light. Within a murky gray space, a streak of five-colored light suddenly appeared before transforming into an indistinct humanoid figure. Even though its facial features were rather blurry, judging from its attire, this appeared to be Han Li. As soon as he appeared, he inspected his surroundings with blue light flashing within his eyes. This seems to be an illusionary restriction rather than a Zumi space. Could it be that the wisp of spiritual sense was trapped in a certain level of restriction? Han Li murmured to himself in a perplexed manner.